So, 2024. What a year, eh? As the year comes to a close, I thought it'd be nice to put all my videos into one massive video. So, if you want some background noise or want something to listen to as you fall asleep, here you go. Here are all the videos that I released in 2024. Here's hoping 2025 is better. Ciao. Nights in the Dreams was a game designed by Sonic Team for the Sega Saturn, back when they were allowed to work on things that were not blue, pointy, began with S and ended with Onic. It is a fast-paced score attack game based in the dream world where you play as knights, a funky little jester thing that flies through 4 courses in each level, trying to get this thing called an idiot in each course. Knights, as a character, was designed to be a dream traveller because Sonic Team wanted to make a character that you could quote-unquote meet. The logic behind this is, as Knight is a dream traveller, if you were to go to sleep, and at some point in your dream Knight was to appear, technically, you would be meeting the same character from the game. The fact that they were designed to be androgynous also helps this, as Knights is supposed to take on the perceived gender of whatever dreamer they are inhabiting. But what is an idiot? Why is there ground in the sky? I'll answer all these a bit later. The story starts off with this dude here called Wise Man. He created a place called Nightmare and wants to destroy an utopia, also he can steal something called Idiot. To do this, he makes 2 jesters, Knights and Riala, and while Riala did what he was asked, Knights did not. They wanted to do their own thing, and started to rebel, which caused Wise Man to lock them in the timeout corner. Meanwhile, in the real world, 2 kids called Elliot and Clarence are having a bit of a rough day. Elliot just got beaten in the game of basketball, which made him feel embarrassed and contemplate his life choices, while Clarice is having crippling anxiety trying to audition for this citywide event. It turns out Clarice comes from a family of artists, so she wants to prove that she has her family's artistic talent. I did not say both issues were equal. When they both go to sleep, they both start to have nightmares about what happened before doing what I wish I could do and run into the light. Which, after that, they are immediately ganged up on and beaten while the idiot is stolen and taken to idiot jail. And thus, the gameplay loop of Knights begins. Knights as a game is all about that score. The higher the number, the better the rank. In fact, to even play the final level, Twin Seeds, you need to get at least a C rank on all the levels before it. You first start off as an itsy bitsy child, and will have to walk to Knight, who is all the way over there. Once you reach Knight, touch them, and then you'll be able to play as them, which then you'll fly around in a 2.5D space, following a set path to the idiot and getting as many points as possible. In order to break the idiot out of its container, however, you need balls. Blue balls to be exact, 20 of them. After you are relieved of your blue balls and free the idiot out of its container, you then enter bonus time. During bonus time, there is a score multiplier active and the blue balls turn into piss balls. This is where you focus on getting as many points as possible, as well as reaching the prison again within the time limit. If you don't get back there in time, you will turn back into an itsy bitsy child, and will have to avoid the floating clock that threatens to wake you up, but not in a nice way. As Knights, you can attack in 2 ways. You can charge things, which eat up this meter here, and you can paraloop, which is where you do a loop-de-loop and anything caught in is sent straight to the bin. After doing 4 courses, you'll then be whisked away to a boss fight which can range from pathetically easy to what the fuck am I supposed to do? The quicker you beat the boss, the higher the score multiplier is, which can help if you had a few bad runs in the courses before. Repeat this 4 more times for both characters and you would have beaten the game. It's not long, in fact it takes you less than 2 hours to get from beginning to end. I actually streamed this game with my nightmarian friend Ember recently on my YouTube.
What would you do if you met Knights in real life?
Fucking scream.
I still love the idea of JamNikke flying out of prison doing the somersaults and stuff. They're like, stop him!
It does, it goes for the entirety of City Escape. Why is the cleavage so fucking big? Ow. Despite this, even after seeing the end credits, you're not done with the game. You're supposed to come back to levels time and time again to try and perfect that run, get a higher score, or maybe actually clear one level was about turning back into an itsy bitsy child. My god, I hate this level. There are 4 levels per character. Technically 3, since they both share the same final level, Twin Seeds, and they're all fairly easy to go through. Minus 1, that is the Spawn of Satan, and I hate with all of my being. The design of these levels vary greatly, however they all tend to follow the same kind of design philosophies. They all have floor in the ceiling, for example, since this is a dreamscape and they really want to hammer that point home. They also have things like bus stops or benches lying around level design to try and give the environment a lived-in feel. Not too dissimilar from those liminal spaces that you can find online. This is all topped off with an absolutely fantastic soundtrack, and it's probably one of my favourite soundtracks for the Sega Saturn. The music can vary between joyful and downright menacing, and my favourite of the soundtrack has to be the one when you're fighting against Rayet. For Claris, you start off in Spring Valley, a simple level where you go through green hills and is overall a very chill experience. This is the level that they usually use whenever there's a Knight's callback, so you probably know this from the Knight's pinball table from Sonic Adventure or the Knight's minigame in the PS2 iToy collection. After that, then there's Mystic Forest, which is a bit harder, and it has a neat top-down section where you can guide this car to a garage for an achievement if you're playing the re-release on PC or Xbox. After that, you then have Soft Museum, where the game devs shove their Knight's inflation fetish in your face, oh my god, get it away from me, and you get fired out of a cannon for some reason. Jumping over to Elliot's side, we have Splash Garden. Not as memorable of a first level as Spring Valley, but it's still an overall good vibe. After that, there's a Frozen Bell, a cool romp through a snowy landscape where Knights can also turn into pure nightmare fuel. Then last and certainly least, we have Stick Canyon. Which is funny, because I can think of one place where the level design can stick it, because every time I play this, I always run out of time at the final rail bit and turn into a goddamn itsy bitsy child. Each level is also capped off with a boss fight. For Claris, we have Gullwing. He can be beaten by smacking that big, round, bulbous chin. You can also one-shot them with a loop-de-loop, but that's hard to do and I'm bad at games. Then there's Gulpo, a fish you have to attack by using these other fish to launch you at them. Then we have Jackal. He's a twat. In order to beat him, you need to keep him away from their cape. You gotta keep dashing into them to damage them, but I keep messing it up. The time I streamed this, I just about beat him with 4 seconds to spare. Ah, that's annoying. Go, 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 go. No. Come here, you. Okay, did I get him? I got him. Oh.
How much is Kingdom Hearts still gonna be?
Over on Elliot's side, you have Puffy, a big round ball you have to keep pushing back until the level design itself decides it's had enough of her. Afterwards, there's Claws, a cat that attacks with the power of rats. You just need to attack the rats when they start to flame, and then go in for the kill once Claws has nowhere left to go. Lastly, there's Riala. How will this epic rivalry end? 2 sides of the same coin, the Shadow to Night Sonic. It's a very simple 3 power loop and he's done boss fight. Very underwhelming. After you've bonked all bosses in the head and got a C rank or above, the final level will open up to you, where you can take the fight to Big Man Wiseman. The climax of the game is based in a level that is designed around the very city both kids live in. Wiseman is probably using the kids' own memories against them to create his domain. When you first spawn in, you see knights surrounded by some sort of bubble. But when you walk up to them, you get thrown across the map, so no knights playtime for you. Well, now what? Standing around here won't help, so you might as well just fall down and try again. This bit right here is why I love this game so much. The dark, foreboding atmosphere is beaten back by the sheer determination of the player character. No longer needing the power of knights to fly, they can do it themselves using their own sheer force of will. They are in control of their own emotions. They have the power to overcome whatever thing was giving them anxiety before. They themselves are enough. Without context or background knowledge, this whole segment of the game looks a bit weird. There are no words spoken at all in the game unless you count. So plot-wise, it does kinda seem to come out of nowhere. But if you watch the opening for both characters and read their plot bio in the instruction booklet, you will see that we've been playing with kids who have been suffering from anxiety, who have this big foreboding fear looming over them. That very same fear is what the nightmares have been taken advantage of to try and steal their idiot, to break their willpower down, but through the power of nights, they've been able to get the courage to go out on their own and fight back. And that is a great finale for a game like this. Twin Seeds as a level is pretty straightforward. They can be pretty stingy with the blue balls here, so some routes you need to make sure you get every single one of them in one run. Once you get all 4 idiots, you then fly over to Knights, and with the help of the other character that you did not pick, you break them out of their little naughty corner prison, and you go off to confront Wisemen themselves. The fight here is pretty straightforward. He has 4 phases: fireballs, rock balls, ice balls, and wind balls. Get through all of these and slap him 4 times, and that's really it. He is beaten. And Knights looks at you for a job well done. Elliot and Clarice both wake up, and with a renewed resolve, go outside to face the issue that was giving them problems before. Elliot goes, and with the power of jumping really high, wins the rematch, while Clarice goes to the audition and is finally able to face the music, and is able to show the judges just how good her Lala skills are. Once you've reached the end with both characters, you're then shown the finale. Elliot's walking through town with his friends when he hallucinates Knights in a poster, and rather than going to A&E for possible head trauma, he goes to the event and sees Clarice singing. Instead of paying for a ticket like a reasonable person, he runs down the aisle and just stares at her while she sings, and then they both just group hallucinate the dream world they were just in. And yeah, roll credits. That's the story of Knights. I'm of course paraphrasing a lot, as most of the extra content that I use for plot breakdown is taken from outside sources like the booklet the game came with, or websites like the Knights Wiki. Overall, it's no surprise that I love this game. It's a cornerstone of my childhood, and it's one of the reasons why I love this era of Sega. They put so much attention to detail into seemingly pointless things, like the A-Life system. In each level, you have these flying angels around, which Ember described as flesh-coloured chow, and now I can't unsee that. And they go off and do their own things while you're off playing the level. There's a whole breeding system where you throw enemies at them and they lay an egg, and the resulting creature will have characteristics of that enemy and the angel. There's a really convoluted system where the end goal is to get something called a King Knightopian, which will make a castle in the level which will stay there long after they are gone. If this sounds familiar, well that's because this system will then eventually become the Chow Garden, which is used in Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, and is something that the Sonic fans are asking Sega to bring back even to this day. And then you have the missing / unfinished content side of things. There's a whole community out there that are trying to figure out what is going on with this removed boss called Self. There's a good video from this person called DigiValentine about this, and it's really interesting if you like looking into cut content. There's so much to this game than just a simple A to B score attack. It has this charm that only the old Sonic team had, and is a game that really can't be compared to anything because there's just nothing quite like it. Not even the sequel on the Wii has the same kind of charm that this one has. I do understand that the game's not for everybody. I'm speaking from a very biased background here. Despite that, I do implore you to at least try it out. It's out on Steam for just £5.99 and runs really well on pretty much any modern setup. And you can also play this on Xbox thanks to their backwards compatibility system. It's a bit more expensive at £6.75, but if you have an Xbox One lying around or a Series console, I do recommend checking it out on there. Anyway, that's enough from me. I hope you enjoyed this look into one of Sonic Team's most misunderstood games, and who knows, when you go to sleep, you might find yourself meeting a certain purple jester. If you are a Sonic fan and have been around the internet for long enough, there's a good chance you have at least heard of a game called Sonic Robo Blast 2, or SRB2 for short. It's one of the longest running Sonic fan game projects out there. Hell, the project's now 25 years old now, which is insane for a fan game project. Even now the project's getting updates and the forum is very active. I was playing this even back when I was a child. They didn't even have a finished Knuckle sprite back then, and instead they used this 3D model which just looked all sorts of jank. But I spent a lot of time online playing the racing mode or deathmatch, so it's a game that's near and dear to me. Made by Sonic Team Jr., it is a total conversion mod of the old Doom game. That first-person shooter where you hunt demons somehow got turned into a 3D Sonic game. I still have no idea how they managed that. It has had countless years of fan support, and since it is on the Doom engine, there are years of mods for it, some being maps, characters, or, completely new game modes. One of the more popular mods back then was Mystic Realm, which added a whole new campaign with its own secrets and unlockables. One of these mods was called SRB2 Kart, which turned the 3D platformer into Mario Kart basically. It's one of the more popular mods out there, however it was lacking things like a single player mode, as you can only really play online unless you're really into time trial modes. Now, the team over at Kart Crew have made a new kart racer. It has a full single player mode, and it has loads of unlockables. Along with this, it also adds more mechanics to it to set it apart from the crowd, and has overall changed the feel to it to something completely new. This isn't a sequel to SRB2 Kart. This is Dr. Robotniks Ring Racers, and the game will make you know that. Ring Racers is a game that will kick your ass if you do not play by its rules. If you go in and play it like Mario Kart, you will not do well. You will need to get to grips with its mechanics. First off, at the start of each race you have the starting grid. Here you can drive around, collect rings, and push other players before the race starts. You need to be careful, however, because if you touch the starting line before the race starts, doing so will cause you to fault. This means you have to wait a few seconds after everyone has already ran ahead before you can start. However, if you are sneaky, you can push other players past that line to give you the advantage. It is so satisfying doing that to that one CPU that's been giving you grief for the whole cup. The first one across the line gets a massive speed boost, which, depending on your skill level, might actually end up hurting you more than actually helping. Across each track you have rings. These kind of work like coins in Mario Kart, as in the more you have, the faster you go. However, unlike in Mario Kart, you can spend rings for a speed boost, which can be used to help you get over steep hills and overtake other players. Then, you have drifting. There are several levels, with the last one giving you a boost which lasts way longer than the others, however, it does take a while to get there. After that, you have the shortcut barriers. These can range from small shortcuts to some pretty big cuts. However, to even take them, you need to be going fast. Once you reach a certain speed level, you get this blue aura around you, which can then be used to bypass the barriers. Without that, you get thrown back, which can cause you to lose time. There are also these jump panels which you can trick off to access certain areas, or to avoid falling into pits. And a butt stomp which can be used to quickly descend. Lastly, we have the spin dash move which can be used to get you out the mud quickly, and a whip attack which you can use when you have no rings to basically just push people away. So, from that list, it's no surprise that when you start off it can be a bit overwhelming. Hell, when I first started playing I could not make heads or tails of it all. It felt like I had to do an entirely new song and dance for each new track. However, once it all clicked, there's nothing quite like it. It is the most rewarding game I've played in a long while. You end up entering this ebb and flow while racing, juggling your ring count and using them when you need that speed boost, tricking off certain panels to get you the advantage, using the correct shortcuts to cut the most out of the track. It all just becomes second nature. However, all these mechanics wouldn't mean much if the track design and characters were not up to snuff. Thankfully, they hit it out the park. Starting the game for the first time will drop you into the tutorial. It's pretty long, but honestly it's not that bad, and it goes over most of the mechanics and is a pretty cute tutorial for a fan game. In this game's universe, Eggman and Tails have joined forces to create the Ring Racer project. Why? Not entirely sure, to be honest. And the lore for this fan game is actually pretty damn good. It's not in your face, in fact you really have to go digging to find some little nuggets of lore there, here and there. But for a fan game, it really helps make the world seem that much more lived in. You can leave the tutorial early if you want to, either by using the exit teleporter or by doing a secret race against AI opponents. And then, from there, you're thrust into the main menu. When you're first here, there's not really a whole lot you can do. To unlock things like online multiplayer or mods, you'll need to do at least one single player CPU cup and come within at least the top 3. Unless you use a password, but you're not a filthy cheater, are you? You wouldn't do that, would you? The track design for this game can be a bit of a mixed bag. There are some absolutely fantastic tracks in this game. However, there are about 1 or 2 which make me want to tear my hair out. They're the kind of tracks that you would pick on purpose to ruin everybody else's day. But then again, with over 200 tracks, there are bound to be some that just don't gel well with you. Despite this, the track list itself is great. You have some real deep cuts to not only your Sonic knowledge, but Sega knowledge as well. Here are some members that there was a Sonic popcorn making machine. Well, now you can race in it. Here are some members of one of Sega's forgotten IP, Sakura Wars. Well, these devs certainly haven't forgotten. How about racing in the very cityscape that was in a few of the Sonic promotional pictures that were part of Sonic the Screensaver? There's even a whole GP Cup which is nothing but competitive levels from Sonic 3, which was a great touch and really just goes to show how in tune with the Sonic IPs these devs are. The character selection is also great. You have the usual crowd of Sonic, Tails, Metal Sonic, Knuckles. However, you also have oddballs like Vector Man, Billy Hatcher, Mail from Pomful Mail, and yes, you can even race as a ring racer themselves. Hell, they even got knights in there, and you know how much I love knights. There are even these little followers that chase you around which act as your horn. On top of that, there are over 70 odd spray cans to collect that unlock new colours to use. Honestly, the amount of content in this game that can be unlocked is fantastic. The way to unlock most of these things can range from pretty easy, however, to mind-numbingly hard. For the spray cans, it's simple, you just need to drive over them to collect them. But for the followers and characters, as well as secret modes, you have to jump through a few hoops. I absolutely hated the one that you had to do to unlock Big the Cat, because I'll always get hit by the CPU and fall into the water. Thankfully, if you're bad at games like I am, you can skip these with the use of Chow keys. You get a new key every couple of races. I want to say 10, but I could be wrong. Hi, Future Chaz here from the editing room. I was wrong. It's 5. 5 races. And you can spend them to bypass any quest you really don't want to do. However, to bypass the big quests, you'll need 10 keys and every challenge around it done, so be sure to save up on them keys if you want to skip some of the big challenges. However, if you play online or do a few cups, you'll soon find yourself with loads of keys to spend. Speaking of which, how is the online play in this game? So, you think you mastered the mechanics, you've unlocked a few characters that you feel really good using, and won all the easy cups. I bet you feel really good about yourself. You might even think that you're good at the game. Oh, what's this option? Online play? Surely, I will be just as good as this as I am on the easy mode cups. What could possibly go wrong? Oh good god. Yeah, even after loading everything, the game will still kick your ass. Part of this is due to the weapons. While they are the standard karting fare, there are some which stick out. First off, you've got the super ring. Simple to understand, it just gives you 20 rings off the bat. Then, you have the sneakers. You can get these in packs of 1 or 3, and each one gives you a burst of speed, which is really handy when you're trying to get through a shortcut barrier. Followed by the rocket sneakers, which are kind of like the golden mushrooms from Mario Kart, where it gives you shorter bursts of speeds, but you get more of them. Robotnik is a simple weapon. You get these balls that rotate around your cart, which gives you a really good defensive edge. However, you can also fling the balls in front of your cart or behind, and they'll bounce off any walls until they hit something. Jaws, or Sharkpedos, are generally the red shells of the game. you'll fling them in front of you and they'll home in on anybody, but you can fling them behind you where it will home in on you, but a bit slower, so you can use that as a way to get people off your tail. Invincibility makes you invincible. Who would have thought that? Then you have the the ghost. It steals the weapons of anybody who drives into it and gives it to whoever dropped the ghost behind. Grow does what it says on the tin and makes you shoot up in size, whereas Shrink sends these little wasp enemies onto the track and drop these shrinking rays, which shrinks down anybody who drives into them. However, if you drive into these rays, it will instead make you grow. The ball hog chucks bombs both in front or behind you, and if you've got more than one, if you hold down the button, you'll chuck the entirety of your arsenal. The pogo stick is a rare find item. You can't get it in the weapon roulette, you can only find it in capsules on the track, and it just gives you a little bounce, so it's a good way to jump over hazards. Then you have the egg mark. This annoying weapon basically makes you a ticking time bomb. It disguises itself as an item capsule. However, you can also pass it on to anybody if you don't fancy blowing up. The self-propelled bomb is basically the blue shell of the game. It will home into whoever's in first place and leave them behind these little rings that the people behind can drive into for a little speed boost. However, if the person in first place is skilled enough, they can outrun the bomb or use a thunder shield to get rid of it. The landmine is a weapon that you plant behind you and it will blow up whenever anybody gets close enough to it. The proximity mine is more the same, but it's less precise. The garden top is a weapon where, if used correctly, can decimate other people. However, the learning curve is more of a learning wall. Even now, I still don't fully understand how to use the thing. The flame shield offers you bursts of speed, however, you can burn it out if you use it too much. The bubble shield basically pushes people away from you when used, and if you drop down while having it, you can get a massive speed boost. The thunder shield draws rings into you and can basically be used as a get away from me button in case people get close enough to you, and as previously stated, can get rid of self-propelled bombs. The kitchen sink is an incredibly rare weapon. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen it in gameplay, and when thrown, it will instantly kill whoever it touches. And as a battle mode only item, you have the Gachapon, which is basically a simple lobbing weapon. Nothing really special about it, really. Then lastly, the worst item. I hate it. You will grow to hate it. The goddamn bumper. God, this item sucks so much. It has ruined so many of my runs. Once hit, it won't just stop you. Oh no, that would be too kind. Instead, it flings you, either backwards or forwards. It really depends on which direction you hit it. And it's not just a small amount. Oh no, it's a full-on chuck. And it does not go away. So you can crawl your way back to a good spot. Say you're first and then you go back to last and then back to first again. Then on the next lap, bam, you hit it again. Oh God, I hate it so much. Speaking of the Grand Prix and bullshit difficulty, did you know that, along with all the other things to collect, there are also special stages? Yeah, special stages in a kart racer. And my God, these are hard, but not just hard to play, but hard to get to. You need to get enough points and rings at the end of any cup on normal mode, and it will drag you to the special stage where you have to free it from its claw cage prison. Just you and the claw one-on-one. And while racing, a really nice track plays on in the background. My God, the soundtrack to this game is amazing. Not only do they have songs made just for the game, but the songs that they're taken from other IPs, oh, the soundtrack is top tier. And it just goes to show how much attention to detail the devs have, because not only do you have some really good mechanics, not only do you have a bunch of things to unlock, not only do you have a really meaty single player mode, you have online, you have collectibles, you have special stages. Honestly, it is one of the most packed kart racing games I have ever played. And that's all I really have to say about the game. It is hard, it is unforgivable at times, but my god, it is the most fun I've had playing a kart racer. Not only for all the obscure callbacks to Sonic and Sega game, but the game just feels good to play. Once it clicks, there is really no other kart race that even feels close to it. A lot of people have complained about difficulty, and while I get it, I get the feeling they're trying to play this like Mario Kart, which the game is not. If you play the game expecting a Mario Kart-like experience, the game will wreck you. You need to play it by its own rules. The modding scene for this is also really big. The dev behind Pizza Tower is even making mods for this game, which I cannot wait to play. And as it's on the Doom engine, just about anybody with the proper tools can start making racetracks or characters. It's free. It will run on your fridge possibly. Honestly, it is worth a look. The devs have spent a long time working on this and it shows. And it's maybe personal bias, but man, I'm just happy to have a game where you can lock things in. It gives me this sense of purpose while playing. Sure, I might be losing races. I might lose a GP here or there. But I will return to the main menu and find out that I've unlocked several characters or colours or tracks. So even while you don't make progress, you're still unlocking things. You're still making progress, but just not in the way that you want. Now, what would I do to the game if given the chance? I'm not too sure. I'll probably suggest making the special stages a bit easier to get to. Maybe make the mud a bit easier to get out of, because sometimes it feels like once you're in there, there's no way out. But mainly, the last thing would be, remove the bumper. Please, I beg you, I will do it. Tetris is a game that needs no introduction. It's one of the oldest running game series out there, starting off in 1984 on the Electronica 60. However, it hit worldwide appeal from the Game Boy release. It has had a release on almost every console under the sun, and the community is one that is just getting bigger by each passing day. Not just by playing whatever new versions out there, but older releases as well. Just this year, in fact, there was an article about a 13-year-old who was actually able to, quote, beat the NES version. Basically, if you play the game long enough, the code kind of just gets confused and the game freezes, basically making this the completed state. There are versions of the games that have their own gimmicks, like the one on the Wii. What's that? A Wii game having a gimmick? Go figure. Crossover with other puzzle games like Puyo Puyo, and one release being a Battle Royale, which for the life of me I just can't win. Please let me win. I want to win. I, myself, love this puzzle series. It's a great pick up and play kind of game and helps me relax. Something about thinking ahead about what your next move is, trying to get that T-spin just right, and trying not to accidentally drop down in the wrong place. Oh god damn it. But with so many versions of the game, I'm sure they all just kind of blend together after a point, right? It's hard to make a game like Tetris feel new and exciting to play, right? Well, I thought so too. Until the good people over at Enhanced Games took a crack at it, and made what is by far one of the best puzzle gaming experiences one can have, both on the big screen and in VR. Tetris is a game that is popular because of its simplicity. You have a block that is falling down, line up a line of them to get rid of them. There are 7 different block shapes in total, and these are the I block, J block, L block, O block, S block, T block, and Z block. You have to use these shapes to try and clear as many lines as possible, either before a time limit or until you just mess up. The more lines of blocks removed at once, the better. You can spend a block to make it fit in spaces easier, and you can save a block for later, swapping it with one that is currently falling. You can only do this once per block though, so make sure that it's one that you want to save or use. There are no takebacks. For this game, there's also a zone mechanic. You build up a bar while cleaning lines, and you can use them to slow down time and move any lines to the bottom of the screen to help get more lines cleared. It's the only way to get something more than a Tetris, which is where you clear 4 lines at once, and the highest available one being a WTF-RIS, which is where you clear over 25 lines, which, yeah, WTF, how do you manage that? As a more advanced mechanic, you have the T-spin, which is where you get a T-block and spin it at the right point to basically get it where it will not be able to get to just by falling. You can chain this with other T-spins to get a block into places where a novice player just would not be able to. This is not limited to the T block though, it can be done with almost every block, just not the square one because, well, you know, rotating does nothing to it. So, the gameplay is your standard Tetris fare, minus one new gimmick. What makes this game so highly regarded for me? Well, as vain as it sounds, it's all in the presentation. Just looking at this game is a visual treat for the eyes. Every drop is followed by a sound effect and the background changes the more points and lines you clear. And to top it all off, it is accompanied with fantastic sound design. Not only is the music great as it slowly swells up, but the sound of you moving your blocks and dropping them sounds great. It really helps tie everything together. Get some headphones on, and honestly you can spend hours playing it without even noticing, especially if you're playing in VR. So, it plays like Tetris, and has VR, but what else does the game do? Well, there are several different modes to play, and you all bring their own T-spin to the game. This game's whole theme is one based around meditation and the wellness of the mind. This trickles down to the UI and themes, all being something one can relax to, somewhat. There are the odd ones that feel more like you're playing in a rave, but I digress. It also has online challenges every weekend where it sets a goal for points earned or lines cleared for the community to reach. And while it doesn't have an impact on gameplay, it does let you unlock little avatars that you can use to represent yourself in the online mode. This is a nice inclusion because it helps the game have this sense of community. Every weekend you and countless others all work towards one goal, and it's just nice to see. The main meat and bones though is the journey mode. This is the campaign mode for a lack of better comparison. You go through several stages trying to get as high of a score as possible while reaching the end, getting shown different cultures, effects and vibes throughout. And after each round of themes, you get a ranking telling how much of a good boy you are. I enjoy this mode a whole lot, although I do sometimes feel like it drags on near the end, if you haven't passed 5 rounds in one sitting. However, despite this, the last level being a marathon sprint I do really like. It's a good way to show off how your skills have improved throughout the game. Once you beat an area in journey mode, you unlock the level effect for some of the free play modes, which is a nice incentive to try and get as many cleared as possible. And if you really like one of the themes, it gives you the opportunity to play just that rather than going back on the journey mode, which is a nice touch. Along with journey mode, you have effect mode and online matchmaking. Effect mode is where you find more of the traditional Tetris gameplay. You have sprint, where your aim is to clear a certain amount of lines as quickly as possible. Marathon, where you got to clear 150 lines as quickly as possible, with or without the new zone mechanic. Ultra, which is where you get the best score you can within 3 minutes. Master, where you have to do your best at the max difficulty. You also have set playlists, where you go through different themes like on journey mode, but these are all themed around one thing like water, wind or earth. You have all clear, where your aim is to clear as many lines as possible before the timer runs out with predetermined pieces. Combo, where you have to combo as many lines as possible. And target, where you have to clear as many target blocks as possible. These are pretty standard fare, but you also have a few more quirky modes. For example, Countdown is where you have to use forwarding eye blocks to get the best score possible. Purify, we have to clear as many dark blocks within 3 minutes. And Mystery, a mode where after a certain time has passed you get a random effect thrown upon you. Some are good, most however will completely mess you up. Already that is quite the meaty compendium of game modes, but that's just the effect mode. There's even online matchmaking modes which have their own set of different gameplay styles. Connected is where you form a 3-person team to take out an AI or person-controlled boss. Here you all work together to get as many line breaks as possible. Then you have Zone Battle, where you use the zone mechanic to try and outscore the other player with line attacks thrown in to throw the other player off. Score Attack, which is just simple Tetris, the higher score wins. And then you have Classic Score Attack, no tricks, no block holding, just the simple original Tetris moveset, higher score wins. And that's that. The modes here cover everything from the pure simple Tetris gameplay to some more adventurous modes, so no matter what you fancy, there will be something there for you to play. Along with this, you can also set a little avatar for yourself as mentioned before. These range from animals, shape, man himself, and even the player character avatar from Rez, another game that enhanced release which is also really damn good. These avatars don't really do much, but other players can see them flying through space, whether on the effect menu or the multiplayer screen. You get more for leveling up, doing certain things, and as mentioned before, taking part in community challenges. And yeah, that's really it gameplay mode wise. VR is handled really well with this game. You can even play it in VR on the PlayStation, Steam, or even the Xbox Game Store app on PC. Unlike in most VR games where you're constantly on the move, this game has you sitting down with a controller and instead uses the VR screen to further extend the play area. If you turn around while playing, you'll just see the current effect extended. Playing underwater? Enjoy the ocean. Playing in space? Now you can stare into the abyss. Honestly, it's so well done that it's sometimes hard to go back to just playing on desktop mode. Honestly, get some good headphones on while playing in VR and you can be surprised how much time has passed between starting the game and finishing it. Before you know it, it's been 2 to 3 hours. You can feel the music building while playing, and when the music swells up to its climax, you can't help but feel the excitement building up within you. This is helped by the stellar soundtrack. Honestly, it knows when to be mellow and when to hype you up. But then again, music in games is one of Enhanced Games' strong points, so this isn't really surprising. Every mode on this game can be played with VR, and nothing is lost in the translation. I mean, why would it? It's Tetris. But despite that, and this may well just be me here, but I honestly feel like whenever I play this game in VR, I do better than on desktop. Not having any outside distraction does wonders, just you and the game falling block by block. It's because of this that the game is one of my top VR games of all time, and it's one I've always recommended people try when they first get a VR headset. Yes, it is Tetris, but the way they use VR to make it more than that is honestly one of the best things about it. There is no other VR experience quite like this at the moment. The use of music and visuals is masterful. Even outside of VR, it's still a really well made game. If I had to pick a Tetris game to play between now and the end of time, I would probably most likely pick this one because of everything that I've just said. Fun fact, there is a medical term called the Tetris Effect. According to Wikipedia, the Tetris Effect occurs when someone dedicates vast amounts of time, effort and concentration on an activity which thereby alters their thoughts, dreams and other experiences not directly linked to playing the game. But seeing falling objects is not the only thing that the Tetris Effect can do. According to a The Conversation article, playing Tetris, or perhaps a similar game, for around 20 minutes in the hours after experiencing a traumatic event may help to reduce subsequent intrusive memories. Playing Tetris at the point of recalling a previous traumatic experience may also reduce intrusions and distress. It will not surprise me if they picked that name on purpose when making this game, the VR mode being used as a way to further this feeling. To some people, this is just another version of Tetris, and if you don't like Tetris, this game won't really do much to change your mind. But if you like puzzle games or enjoy Tetris, it is honestly a no-brainer to get this game. Even without a VR headset, it's one of the best feeling Tetris games to play, and with the weekly challenges, there's always something to do on it. Tetris is one of them games that just never gets boring to me. I can play this game endlessly. Something about this planning ahead, trying to get a higher score than last time, trying to clear more lines than last time. It's honestly a great way to get the grey matter in your brain working. It is a cultural phenomenon. It has a movie based around the Game Boy release, and honestly shows no signs of slowing down. Whenever there's a new bit of hardware, just like what people do with Doom, you can also guarantee that Tetris will be ported over there at some point. Hell, one of the key selling points of the Sega Mega Drive Classic was a version of Tetris which never came out on that console. It was going to, but it got cancelled last second. This is how much of an impact this puzzle series has had, where a re-release of a cancelled version is seen as a massive win. And while to some, the idea that a puzzle game like this could be a runner for one of the best VR games ever made may seem weird, I would say try it for yourself. Who knows, you might end up getting the Tetris Effect yourself and start seeing falling blocks in your dreams. When you look online for the worst Sonic games of all time lists, more often than not, you'll see that Sonic 06 is on there, and, granted, it is not a great game in any way, I still think people are unfairly negative about it. This has not helped with the 2010s YouTube boom where they just used the game as a collective punching bag for God knows how many years. That being said, I don't think it's the worst Sonic game out there. I don't even think it's anywhere close to the worst Sonic game out there. You have Sonic games like Sonic and the Secret Rings, where you have to unlock better controls within that game. However, the presentation, soundtrack and level themes are great. Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric is a broken, buggy mess due to Sega forcing the developers to change what console the game was due to release on. However, it was a bold new attempt, even if it did not pan out. Sonic 4 is an embarrassing attempt to rekindle some of the Hedgehog's past glory, with none of the soul and none of the fun. But even that, the game's not bad, it's just painfully mediocre. But all of these are nothing. I can still play these games and get some form of enjoyment out of it in one way or another. But there's none of that for the game that I'm about to talk about. This Sonic game is not fun to play at all. It feels more dated than the very games that came out on the same console, and it just looks atrocious. What happens when you take the 3D sprites from Sonic 3D Blast and slap it onto a 2D platformer? You get Sonic Blast, and my pick for the worst Sonic game out there. But, despite this, should you play it? Sonic Blast, or G-Sonic as it's known in Japan, is a 2D platformer made on the Sega Game Gear in 1996. It was also released on the Master System in Brazil in 1997, and was Sega's attempt to cash in on Nintendo's Donkey Kong money. They are not the first to try that. Nintendo themselves tried it with Donkey Kong Land on the Game Boy as an example. However, the main issue of Sonic Blast is, it just feels like something that was made on the cheap to try and catch in on a craze. It does nothing to set it apart, it's just there. The plot is your standard Sonic fare. You play as Sonic or Knuckles as they try to stop Dr. Eggman from using the Chaos Emeralds to fortify his base of operations. No Tails though, I'm guessing he's off taking a nap somewhere. To stop Eggman, you dash through several zones trying to find the Chaos Emeralds along the way, which takes on Sonic 3's method of jump in big ring hidden in level. Overall, it's a very short game, taking about an hour if you try to get all the emeralds. Now, first impressions of the game are not kind. This game is ugly. The sprites look too big, making the screen look cramped, the levels look flat thanks due to the pre-rendered look of everything, and worst of all, the game just feels sluggish to play. You will get caught on the level geometry, you will get hit by badniks you have no way of spotting, the special stages play against your depth perception, the level design itself is uninspired. As far as impressions go, it's like the game slaps you in the face the moment you turn it on and it just goes downhill from there. But, you know, enough about first impressions, let's just take a look into what makes this game feel so bad to play. There are a total of 5 zones in the game, ranging from bland to oh my god let this sweet hell end. Each zone has 3 acts each, with the third one being a boss battle. And they're all your typical Sonic fare. You start off in Green Hill Zone, shocking, I know, and here's where you get to have a feel for the character. If you're playing as Sonic, you get a double jump which can be used to explore the level design a bit, and Knuckles has his glide and climbing skills. This is to help find the special stages that I mentioned earlier. There is one special stage in each of the first 2 acts, however only the second act has the Chaos Emerald in. The first one just gives you an extra life. After Green Hill, you have Yellow Desert, which is where the blind level design starts to feel apparent. There are spikes dotted around in seemingly random locations, and some of the enemies start to blindside you due to limited screen space provided. After that, you got Red Volcano, which has the same issue as Yellow Desert, only instead of spikes, it's lava. Fancy. Then, you have Blue Marine Zone. I hate this zone. It is the worst zone I've ever played in any Sonic game. It's the worst level I have played in any game, period. Your slow movement is made even slower when you're underwater. That, plus the limited bubbles the game gives you, and the overuse of the goddamn tubes to get anywhere, it's honestly one of the worst experiences I've ever had playing a game. It's like the level's made just to make your day worse. If this level was a human, I'd punch it in the face. Thanks to the maze-like level design, you'll find yourself turned around several times. And the added stress of the ticking oxygen timer does not help. I can say one good thing though about this level: the moment you are out of the water, the game feels like it's running 10 times quicker. So I guess that's something. Finally, you have Silver Castle Zone. This one uses teleporters and this annoying spiked wall mechanic. It's okay, take your time. If you're just going from A to B, you'll go through all the acts fairly quickly, minus Blue Marine. However, if you, for some reason, choose to go for the emeralds, then it will take slightly longer to get everything. The special stages themselves are a take on the Sonic 3D Blast special stages, and not the good ones on the Saturn. You run across a void, collecting 50 rings before you reach the end of the stage. They do get slightly more complex, but honestly, it's really easy. I did them all first try, and they do not challenge you in the slightest. If you get all 5 emeralds, yes, there are just 5 in this game, then you unlock the final boss fight, which is one of the worst designed bosses I've ever seen. Not looks wise, mind you. I really dig the fact that it made him look like a cracked egg, but more mechanically. To hit him, you first need to jump on the lower platform and then on his head. But the timing for this is far too tight. You need to be exact with your timing. If you're just a millisecond too slow, then you'll just bounce right off him. Honestly, it's far too tight a time frame. If they were to increase the time frame by just a single second, then the fight would be a lot more smoother. Eventually, you'll beat him up and then you'll get to see the ending. And yeah, roll the credits. Make no mistake, I love this franchise. Even now, I buy whatever new release is out there, and I'm eagerly looking forward to the Sonic Cross Shadow Generations remake that's coming out this year. But man, this game just stinks. And not in a, I'm sure there's something fun here. No, it's just bad. All of it's bad. Bad. Everything about it just does not mesh well. You can't blame the Game Gear for this, as there are some really good Sonic games on the thing. But this just feels like a failed experiment that should just be forgotten about. The game on release did not review well, both with the original release and the 3DS version that was put on the eShop before that closed down, rest in peace. The version of this game that I played was the one on Sonic Origins, which my lovely community forced me to play. I streamed this live on my Twitch. Are you taking the mic? No! I also played the 3DS release while writing this video just to get more coverage. Both versions suck, but the 3DS version plays a bit better at least, but that's not saying much. If you want to play this game for whatever reason, you can play it as part of the Sonic Origins Plus pack. It's one of the many added Game Gear games, but I do recommend to play any other Game Gear game other than this. There are some really good ones on there, Tail's Adventure being my personal favourite pick. But, to answer the question I asked at the beginning of this video, should you play Sonic Blast? No, you should not. Honestly, I would be surprised if anybody thought this was not going to be the answer. Just a heads up, I will be talking about the plot of this game in great detail, so if you haven't already, please consider checking the game out before watching the video. Otherwise, let's get on with the show. History is not kind. If you are not the best at what you do, you will be forgotten to its tide when enough time passes, forever sent to the realm of obscurity. This is true for most media. Think about how many books have been lost, how many films will never be watched again, or how many songs have just disappeared. This is also true for video games. There are many games in the PS1 that people remember as classics of their time, but what about the games that were not as good or fell a bit short? For every Resident Evil, you have Overblood. For every siphon filter, you have gun gauge, and for every Tomb Raider, you have Bubsy 3D. Okay, yeah, that one's a bit of a stretch. It really felt like the Wild West of games. You can go to any game store at the time and find 10 games that were wildly different from one another. Demo discs helped you keep up to date with what was coming out, and even had full-on demos for games, so you could try games before you begged your parents to buy them for you. One game that has been left to the sands is Silent Bomber, made by none other than CyberConnect 2. Or also known as that company that keeps making them anime fighting games. Or in my case, that company that made the Dot Hack games. It was released in Japan in 1999, but we didn't get it until a year later in 2000. And the best way to describe it is, imagine a 2D shooter, then make it 3D. It plays like a run and gun game with level design to match. And while it did receive positive reception when the game came out, it has however fallen to the pit of obscurity. Which is a shame, because this game deserves to be up there with some of the best PS1 games in my opinion. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's take a look at one of the forgotten gems of the PlayStation 1 and see what makes this game tick tick boom. Silent Bomber is a game that is A, not silent, and B, the bomb. You play as a genetically engineered man called Yuta, a disgraced mercenary who made a bit of an oopsie 7 years ago and accidentally broke several Geneva Convention rules.
Those are... But I thought there were soldiers in here! These people are civilians!
Calm down, Yuta. Burn everything to the ground.
As he goes through the gigantic spaceship called the Dante to take it out of commission before it blows up the planet Hornet. As for how did he find himself in the situation, turns out if you perform war crimes against someone and then the army that you work for collapses, the people who you did the war crimes against will hold that against you. And as the planet was running out of options in regards to not blowing up, I can see why they thought, hey, let's use this guy we have locked up and see if we can make him work for us. And as Yuta deeply regrets what he did, he's more than willing to lend a hand to the situation. You're not alone in this mission, however. Along with Yuta, you have Benoit, a political fiend who's a totally trustworthy fellow, Michino, a selfish spy, Tim, a young pilot, John Loss, a guerrilla tactics pro, and your CEO, Henri Oha, the only person who's trying their best to keep everybody in check. The plan is simple. Sneak aboard the ship, sabotage from within, and try your best to survive. This is short-lived, however, as the access codes that they were hoping to use to actually get into the ship fail, and the ship that they're all in gets shot out of the sky, leaving everybody stranded on top of the massive super ship. Yuta, however, finds himself separated from the main group, and you basically go through each level clearing different objectives which range from blowing things up while you go to A to B, and defend something by, you guessed it, blowing things up. A lot of the plot setting is not told in game. You have to go through the instruction booklet to even find some of this stuff, or just go through the game's page on Wikipedia. However, some of it is detailed in the playable tutorial, which goes straight to the main game once it's done, so that's a good thing to look into. However, once you get onto the Dante, the plot progresses in a pretty fast-paced and well-structured way. There is no downtime, there is no filler, and honestly, it's a pretty solid action game plot. It's not deep, there are no stunning revelations, it just does what it needs to do, which is ferry you from one level to another, from one set piece to the next explosive set piece, and it does it well. Along with this, the voice acting is actually pretty decent as far as PS1 games go, which, while yes, may not be a high bar when you look at some of the PS1 voice acting, but it's a decent thing to see nonetheless. Along with this, the game's pretty short. There are only 14 levels in the game, each one taking you from one point of the Dante to another, and because of the short length, the game does not overstay its welcome. It hits that sweet spot of making you want more, but also not feeling like it was stretched out too much. That being said, a plot is no good if the game itself plays bad. Thankfully, that's not the case here. I saw someone online describe Silent Bomber as a run-and-gun 2D game translated into 3D, and honestly, I think that sums the game up perfectly. The controls are fairly simple. You move with the stick or directional buttons, jump with X, place standard bombs with square, and detonate with triangle. Jumping twice in the air will let you air dash, which is a great way to get out of dodge quickly, and disrupts any lock-on missiles or locked-on things that are heading towards you. Holding down square will show this cone. You can use this to lock onto enemies, sticking bombs on them, or, if nothing's there, you will just lob a bomb at the furthest possible point. Along with standard mines, you have special mines that you can collect while playing, and you can only hold 20 of each. These are electric mines, gravity mines, and good old-fashioned napalm. You can't lock on all of these, but they're still very powerful nonetheless. The electric mine, for example, will absolutely rinse any mechanical enemy that you're fighting. Napalm will stun lock any organic enemies, but it will also damage anything else within its fiery grasp. Gravity will draw in most enemies, leaving them open for you to attack with other methods. On top of this, you can also stack the individual special bombs on top of each other, creating some really devastating effects. If you were, for example, to have 3 napalm and 3 gravity, not only will the gravity draw people in, but the napalm will also slowly burn them while they're in there. This also applies to your standard bombs. You can stack them, and the more you stack, the more damage they do. And it's a great way just to get rid of those beefier enemies in one go. The sounds these bombs make when they're used though, frankly, the sounds in this game are great. They are crunchy, and they're easy to tell apart from the other sounds. So you can tell exactly what sound is yours and what sound is an incoming attack. The screen also shakes when the big explosion is being shown as well. Genuinely, it really helps them feel like they have a real impact. One thing you can do, which is not explained in the tutorial, but it is in the manual, is the wall jump, or climbing jump as they call it. You jump towards a wall, then jump off it to get to higher ground. You don't need this to progress, however you can miss some pretty vital collectibles if you don't use it in some levels. One of these collectibles are called E-chips. These are used to upgrade your max mine capacity, the reach of your ranged attack, and your shields. You can change what chip goes where during gameplay, which is nice, as some levels will require a different build from others. For example, in one level, you're on this small platform while there's enemies off in the distance, so instead of bomb capacity, you might want it more points into range so you can reach them. Others are more gauntlets, so you might want to take points out of range and put it into shields. It's a really versatile system, and the fact that you can change it on the fly reduces the chances of you being caught unawares. It's all about giving the player the freedom to make the build that they want. If you don't want to change build, you're always welcome just to make one build and stick to it. The game is perfectly playable like that, but it could give you the advantage to mix and match. Another thing you can collect is data chips. These are used to unlock characters in the game's surprisingly good 2-player mode. Here, you and a friend, or a computer-operated person, fight against each other using different characters in the game. It's a lot of fun selecting a boss character and just messing around with them, as each character has their own movesets. However, it is a bit limited in regards to arenas, as there's only really one, plus a bonus one you unlock by getting all S ranks. So because of this, ranged characters have an unfair advantage against others. But as a tacked on extra, it's pretty damn fun. Lastly, you can collect health pickups or special bombs that I mentioned earlier. The health pickups come in 10% and 50% varieties, and they're fairly common in the early stages, but in the late game stages they can be a bit stingy with them. All in all, the things that you can do are fairly limited when compared to other action games. However, they make use of your whole moveset pretty well. No one mechanic is just used once and thrown away. They really stretch the bomb throw mechanic to its possible limits. There's a lot of thoughts behind the levels and boss fights in this game, and as said, no mechanic is ignored. So, now that moveset is explained, let's take a look at what you'd be using that moveset to do. The game consists of 14 levels, all based within the mega ship the Dante. However, despite it all being set in one location, The game does enough with the setting to not make every level feel dull. The soundtrack for the game is one that's supposed to make you feel pumped up, while also having some more mellow pieces for the more personal story bit moments. It does its job, but I can't remember any of the tracks outside the game, so none of them really stick with you. To start us off, the first level has us blowing up these anti-air weapons to help our teammates not get turned into Swiss cheese. The level is fairly open and gives the player the chance to get a good feel of the controls. You have the lower area with the objective targets, but you also have the higher path that has some hidden goodies like E-chips and special bombs. Once you blow up all the anti-air guns, you then face a boss. This teaches the player that shields are a pain in the ass. Once the enemy has his shield up, you can't lock onto them. Along with that, any bombs that were locked on will do no damage. Despite this though, the boss is fairly easy, especially if you use electric bombs against them. Next up, you have a run-in with a special yellow fella. His voice acting is fantastic.
I'll finish this guy off! Ugh. You just signed your death warrant! You're dead! Count on it!
He really sells the fact that he just wants you gone. And after a quick 1-2, he runs off to be seen again later. The boss here is a gigantic laser cannon, and it's also a neat touch that the laser also harms other enemies, so it's a good way to let it shoot into the crowd to give yourself some breathing room. But again, like the previous boss, some electric bombs will make short work of this. After all that, you have a totally normal conversation with your buddy Benoit and proceed to the next level. And you find that the Blue Man group are not happy that you're on board the ship. This level is a typical get from A to B level. However, this level does teach the player that maybe blowing things up with reckless abandon isn't the best option, as there are some things that, when caught in the crossfire, will emit a bigger explosion, so you can easily find yourself getting caught unaware. After that little bombing run, you're then sent to tackle the hard shells. These are the robotic guards that patrol the ship, and are generally known to be a bit of a nuisance. This level starts to throw a bit more things at the player. Some enemies have built-in shields that just completely disregard your lock-on, so the difficulty slowly starts to build. You also bump into the little yellow fella again, but he's mad, he has a gun, and he wants a rematch. But as before, after a quick 1-2, he runs off again with his tail between his legs.
Damn it! That hurts! I won't forget this!
Level 5 is our first defense mission of the game. Here, we are tasked with defending our allies at the end of the level. Despite what that shield counter says, they won't actually start taking damage until we get there. Here, they started to add flying enemies into the mix. With these, grounded bombs won't work, so you have to use the lock-on. As stated, once you get to the end, you'll then have to defend the ship against several waves of enemies. However, your own bombs can actually harm the ship, so you need to be careful where you're throwing them. Once that's done, you see Yuta and Henri have a little heart-to-heart, only for her to be captured in the middle of their conversation, resulting in Yuta having to run off into the power wires to escape pursuit. Then, you are thrust into the next level, where the game designers start to make you sweat a bit. It's cramped, there are bullets everywhere, and health drops start to not be as common as before. Get to the end, and you're sent straight to Mission 7. Mission 7 starts with us meeting Machino, who knows where Henri is, but, despite us being on the same team, decides, screw that, I want out, and asks you to make a distraction throw to run off somewhere. This level is just one big open area for you to find and blow up things, and honestly it's one of my favourites. Once you're done, you then fight the little yellow fella, only this time he's big, angry, and really wants to turn you into pate. Despite his size though, he's still fairly easy to take down.
But how?
Mission 8 begins with the Blue Men group again, getting annoyed that we're still alive and kicking, and sending their elite team to deal with us. Then the level starts, and you find yourself on a transportation platform speeding down Dante's sewers. This level is mainly you defending yourself against flying enemies, and a boat sometimes. Now, the flying enemies can be locked onto, but the boat can't. You have to pay attention to where it's going, chuck bombs in anticipation, wait for it to get there, and detonate them that way. It's a really good use of the mine throwing mechanic that hasn't been seen yet. This level is also where you should look into changing your E-chip setup, as if you're just collecting them normally, all the points go straight into bomb capacity. However, for this level, range would be the better option, so it's a good way to try and get the player to mix and match their loadout. At the end of the level, the elite guard make themselves known, and you have a little fight with 3 of them at once. Once they're dealt with, you jump into level 9, which is a maze. You have only one goal here: find Ornery. However, despite the maze-looking design, it's a fairly short level, taking only about 5 minutes if you know exactly where to go, but there are a fair few hidden goodies here, so exploration is always encouraged. After you find Ornery, she starts to explain how she feels like she's not up to the job to Utah, which is probably not the best time to have imposter syndrome, being that they're on a ship full of people that really don't want them there. After Utah just says, "Point me in a direction and I'll blow things up," we're sent into level 10. Here, we are sent to blow up several bioweapons that are being made. The level introduces a new enemy type, these weird mantis-looking things. They're unique, as their arms can be locked onto, but their bodies can't. So once the arms are gone, you have to resort to dropping bombs behind you, trying to catch them out that way. Napalm also works wonders against them, so it's always great to mix and match your special bombs when you can. After you deal with them and take a big old spider out of commission, you're sent to the infamous level 11. This level has you going up a big old elevator shaft, and like the sewer level, you're just defending yourself against the rest of the elite guard group and their leader. The leader being a boss fight, which uses shields in a really cool way. He's too far to lock onto, and even if you were to get in range, his shield stops you. Instead, you have to lock onto his buzzsaws, wait for them to return, and then detonate them before his shoulders close. It's a fantastic use of locking and timing your bombs that I wish the game did more of. Once he is dealt with,
I regret nothing.
you go to the bridge, only to find that your game's crashed. Now, I said this level was infamous, but why is that? The level itself seems fairly straightforward. Well, when this game came out in Power Regions, there was a bug at the end of this level, where once you beat the boss and proceed to watch the cutscene, the game would crash. Now, this is a game on the PlayStation 1, you can't patch it, so me and many others were stuck here. I myself never getting past this bit until I was an adult. So, I now realise I did not save the one before, so if this is busted, then I've got to do the last 2 levels. God's sake. Oh, I have to redo the last 2 levels. So, the solution is simple. All you need to do is skip the introduction cutscene at the start of the level and the introduction cutscene for the boss. Once you've done this, the cutscene will play with no issue. I don't know what causes this bug. No one does from what I can see. It's just a very unfortunate and annoying issue with most old releases of this game. But once you get past the little hiccup, you then go into the bridge, only to find that Benoit has murdered the Blue Man group for you. Turns out, the guy who was monologuing to himself and using chess metaphors was evil. Shocking, I know. Now that Benoit has made his plans known, you and the rest of the team decide to put a stop to him, including Machinko, who did not run off, not because she didn't want to, but because she couldn't get past all the bioweapons, so sucks to be her. However, as Benoit has full control of the ship, they can't get past the locked door. Thankfully, there is a station ship nearby with an on-rail cannon, which they can use to blast their way in, so to speak. So, now that there's a new plan, I hope you like defense missions. Because in this mission, you're defending Ornery against an onslaught of bioweapons. And unlike the previous one, this one's a pain. The bioweapons are beefy and Ornery's shield drops like a rock. You need to make sure that you do not hit her, because if you do, your chances of passing go down quite a fair bit. Once you defend her though, you're on to level 13. This level starts off with us watching the entire Hornet fleet get destroyed by the Dante's cannon. So, to stop this, Ornery has you blowing up the reactor within 15 minutes as the ship is charging another blast, this time aiming for the planet itself. In this level, there are 4 different paths that you need to go down. The timing is tight, the design is tough, and you will be challenged by this. However, once you do blow up all 4, the main reactor goes with it, resulting in the Dante unable to use its main cannon. This victory is short-lived, however, as Benoit has enlisted himself in the Star Trek School of Spaceship Battles and decided, you know what, I'm just gonna ram my ship into the planet. And challenges Utah to a one-on-one fight, goading you into the final level. This level showers you in E-chips and special bombs to help you against what is, honestly, a very steep learning curve. Honestly, it's more of a learning wall. Throughout this game, there's been a steady increase in difficulty. The curve is very well done. There's not a point where you feel like you're just thrusting something that you're not prepared for, minus 1 or 2 bits. But this is just a solid vertical wall when it comes to difficulty. To start off, the design of the arena. Here, you have 3 separate effects all going on at once, so it's very visually cluttered. On top of that, you have this god-awful chess mini-boss just before the actual boss, which will drain your health like no one's business. Finally, Benoit is a cheating a-hole. He has the same moveset as you, throwing bombs and locking on, only he does it far quicker than you. His reach also eclipses yours. He can also turn into a massive hologram and grab you, draining your health. Along with this, there are no checkpoints, so when you die, and you will die, you will have to do the god-awful chess boss again. Honestly, it is awful. There should have been a checkpoint in between the 2 fights. Doing so would alleviate a lot of this difficulty wall. However, despite how bad of a jump of difficulty it is still doable. And once you've done it, Benoit reveals that he was the one that ordered Utah to kill all those civilians way back 7 years ago, then activates the ship's self-destruct system. Utah tells the others get out of Dodge quickly before they all burn into a crisp, saying that it can find its own way out, and then we see the Dante exploding into a gigantic fireball. Three years pass. Anne-Ray explains that she left the military after all that due to internal conflict, and turns around and sees Utah, who, somehow, got off the ship. And yeah, that's all 14 levels of the game. It's short, but it's all killer, no filler with this. And can take around about 2 hours to beat, give or take, not counting the retries or the final boss, that will put you through your paces. I actually streamed this on Twitch not too long ago to get some footage for this video. I was not expecting the uppercut, okay. Oh, that's annoying. And once you're done with the game, you unlock a mode where you can go back and replay any level you want to get any missing E-chips or data chips in the VR mode, or to get a higher ranking. Speaking of the VR mode, you unlock certain characters depending on how well you do in the single player mode. Got all Bs? You unlock the little yellow fella. You get Benoit by getting all A's, and what is by far the most bizarre inclusion, a Neko tank from CyberConnect's earlier game, Tal Concertio, by getting all S ranks, which changes the design of the arena when used. And yeah, that just about covers everything you can do in this game. So, now that Hornet is saved, how does the game compare to others on the PlayStation 1? Silent Bomber does not do anything new. It is not breaking new ground, the plot does not ask any deep philosophical questions about the horrors of war. And you know what? That's fine. Not every game needs to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes you just want dumb fun. You want to turn your brain off while you listen to crunchy explosion sound effects and play what is essentially an action film made into a game. It's a shame this game did not sell more. They really explored the moveset they gave you, and a sequel could expand on that even more. A more modern moveset would have been great if they would make it into a twin stick shooter kind of getup where you aim your bombs with the right stick while moving with the left. Maybe using bombs to interact with the environment some more, and more varied locations, and I think you have a recipe for a really good action game there. Unfortunately, the sands of time are not being kind to it. Despite CyberConnect still being around today, they show no real interest in returning to the game's universe. That being said, they haven't forgotten about the game. Utah and the others show up as NPCs in some of the Dot Hack games where you trade items with them for some rare drops. Along with this, the Silent Bomber weapon has an ability called Stuck, which summons a weird looking version of Utah, which is nice to see. Despite mostly positive reviews, the game unfortunately bombed during release. This probably isn't helped by the bug that was on Chapter 11, as word of mouth probably killed any upward momentum this game had. Despite this, however, there are still some people who are spreading the word about this game. Josh Strive Hayes did a really good deep dive into the game, and I do recommend giving that video a watch. This game can be bought on the PS3 Classic Store along with the Vita, and is quite cheap on eBay if you know where to look. However, there's no way to play it on any modern gaming systems unfortunately, which is a shame, because this game deserves to have its time in the limelight. But that's just the way the game industry works. Not every game that plays well sells well. Many people have that one game that they love unconditionally but no one knows about. It's a cutthroat industry. Despite that, I do recommend this game to you. I'm sure that if you were to try it, you would find that it is the bomb. Horror is a genre that I have no real experience with. I dabble in games like Resident Evil, Lethal Company and Little Nightmares for example, but I don't really go out of my own way to play them. Unless of course they're multiplayer focused, so I can suffer with friends. This is because I'm a giant coward who hates anything scary. But that's beside the point. That being said, there is one horror game that has stuck in my mind like glue throughout the years, and to the surprise of no one who has watched my videos before, the game in question is old, not really talked about, and is on an old Sega console. The Sega Saturn is not really known for its horror games. Usually people only really know it for games like Bug, Knight, Sonic R, Burning Rangers, Panzer Dragoon, but there's a whole library of fantastic games hidden on the thing, lost to time. With the push to newer 3D hardware, more and more horror games are coming out making use of the new technology, pushing for impressive cutscenes, detailed pre-rendered environments and music that helps build tension. But the thing about visuals is that they age. Some games that looked amazing back in the day look quite dated by today's standards. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying all games from that era are bad. I myself find that graphic style quite charming and love it when indie games use that same style nowadays. Along with that, I think games like Resident Evil 1-3, Silent Hill, Dino Crisis, Nightmare Creatures for example, still play perfectly well to this day. I'm just saying that visually, the wow factor has just kind of dropped off over the years. One game that I think should be more well known is one called Enemy Zero, made by Warp in 1996 and was counted as part of the D trilogy, because even though it does not share the same name as D1 and D2, it does however share some things like character names and, well, that's really it. I remember the first time I saw it, it was on a Sega Saturn demo disc. There was a gameplay demo of Sonic 3D Blast on there, but there was also something else. A demo movie for a horror game I've never heard of before, but that movie stuck with me. Staying as one of those games that you remember seeing, but you can't quite remember the name of it, until I just so happened to come across a review for the game while I was looking for some new Sega Saturn games to play. It all just came flooding back to me. Instead of focusing on visuals to get the scares across, they instead went for the ears, forcing players to listen to the game, and this makes it one of the scariest games I've ever played. So join me as I wander these hallowed halls, keeping my ear out and trying to survive the Sega Saturn classic that is Enemy Zero. Enemy Zero was originally planned to release on the PlayStation 1, however due to some issues between Sony and Warp, this did not happen. The story goes, Sony said that they will manufacture the pre-order units for the game, which was about 100,000 units. However, they told Enno, the game's director, that they only manufactured 40,000 units, which understandably made him very upset. However, this turned out to be a lie, as they only manufactured 28,000 units, so there are a lot of pre-orders that were flat out cancelled or delayed. So yeah, I can see how this would cause contention between Sony and Warp. In fact, they were that annoyed that they ended up jumping ship to the Sega Saturn early in development. Not before burning any possible bridges between the two of them, by revealing this in what is quoted as a dramatic press conference stunt, where after showing a trailer for Enemy Zero and showing the PlayStation logo proudly in the center, they warped it into the Sega Saturn one during a Sony conference. So that's one way they jump a pipe for the game. They also made sure to release all their newer games on Sega consoles going forward, not counting PC. So yeah, burning bridges would be a bit of an understatement in regards to this stunt. But from what people have said about Keiji Enno as a person, this is totally in character for him, so I have to respect the power play here. And the play worked. It was a relative success for the Sega Saturn, enough of one to get a port to the PC shortly after in 1998. However, despite this, not many people seem to talk about it when discussing older horror games. Usually people tend to talk about Resident Evil or Silent Hill when discussing old horror games of that generation. The fact that it was on the Saturn probably didn't help, as over in the West, sales were not as strong when you compare them to Sony's behemoth. This is also not really helped by the fact that the game hasn't seen a re-release on anything. D at least got a release on Good Old Games, but there's been nothing for the other two games in the D trilogy, locking the games into old hardware. So that means the only real way to play this game now is for the wonders of emulation. Unless you already have a Sega Saturn lying around and don't mind spending a few £100 for the game on eBay. Most people don't have this, so the best way to get the game is by sailing the 7 seas. Hopefully, somebody will make a PC port for this game or re-release it on modern systems. Maybe GOG could release the old PC port at some point. But for the meantime, emulation is probably the easiest way to play this classic. The plot of this game revolves around Laura, who has just been woken up from a cryogenic sleep, only to find out that the ship she is on is crawling with monsters that seem to be invisible to eyes. And the game does a good job showing this just from the intro cutscene alone. First, you see it break out of confinement, and then you see this pipe just get crushed by nothing. It's such a good way to show the main gimmick that the monsters cannot be seen, without having some random person tell the player, "Whoa, they're invisible, innit, bruv?" Another thing this game does well is humanize Laura as a character. There are some scenes in here that really help characterize her. One scene that still sticks to me is when you try to open this locker without a key and she just kicks it out of anger. It's great. But despite this, the plot itself is nothing new. If you watch films like Alien, you'll probably see the plot twist coming from a mile away. But the game frames these scenes so well, you honestly don't mind it. The camera work for these cutscenes are generally really well done. It does feel like you're playing a movie at times. But how does this movie play? Enemy Zero is quite unique when you compare it against other horror games that came out around that time. Most horror games tend to make the monster the main attraction. Resident Evil 3's Nemesis is a good example of this, as the monster chases you down throughout most of the game. Dino Crisis isn't shy of showing off the dinosaurs and making them the main attraction, and Nightmare Creatures makes their varied monster designs apparent from the very first level. However, in what I think is a genius move, instead of focusing on visuals to get the scares across, they instead chose to focus on sound, as the monsters themselves are completely invisible. Because of this, the monsters stay scary even as the years go by. There's no 3D model that can age, it's just you and your imagination. Because of this, you have to take the game slow, listening to this chime to figure out where the monster is in relation to you. Your only means of defense being a slow as hell charge gun that only hits things when they're right up in your face. So, as you can expect, the difficulty is pretty hard, having to rely on your ears to carry you throughout the entire game. This isn't helped with the fact that you die in one hit. Thankfully, there is a training mode on one of the discs called Disc 0 because the devs wanted to be cute like that, which helps guide you through the main gameplay loop. This will get you used to how Laura controls as well, as you can feel a bit sluggish at first, and the game does give you a run button to help get you out of sticky situations pretty quickly. However, you'll find that she controls more like a car. You don't even need to hold anything if you're pressing the run button, she'll just go in the direction that she's facing. Walls will quickly become the bane of your existence. If you run into one, Laura will turn to the nearest clearing, even if you're moving backwards. So, if you're trying to make some room between you and a monster so you can charge up a shot and bump into a wall while walking backwards, Laura will instead choose to look at the side, leaving you open to getting your eyes gouged out. One thing that the training discs do not cover, however, are the room segments. At some points in the game, you'll be in this adventure game-like mode. You'll need to get a thing to use on a thing to get something that you can then use to progress the game. These are usually not that hard, just find something and interact with it, but there are some puzzles that will really get your head scratching, especially if you don't know things like binary. We will get into that. The chimes that are used to detect where the monsters are also have a lot more going on than meets the eye. For example, the pitch of the chime will change depending on where the monster is. If it's behind, it will be deeper. In front of you, it will be higher. To the sides, it will be like a mid-tone. The faster the chimes are also dictates how close the monster is to you, with this warning sound playing when they're right in front of your face. This is all used for you to time the use of your gun. Depending on how far you are in the game, guns can vary between unlimited shots to just one shot per charge, so you need to make sure you make each shot count. Along with this, the gun even takes a while to charge up the shot, and if you wait too long it'll burn out, wasting that shot, so you know, make sure not to do that. Thankfully, the monsters perish after one shot. However, as I said before, the same applies to you. So, if a monster gets up and attacks you, it's game over. Back to the last save point with you, no continues. The save mechanic is also quite unique for this game. It does the Resident Evil thing of using resources to save. However, unlike the guns that can be charged, you can't charge up the save device, so you've only got a limited amount of energy to save your game. Along with this, it costs resources to load as well. So, if you keep dying at the same area time and time again, you're going to run out of energy and you won't even be able to load your game, let alone save it. The game has 4 difficulty options, one being unlocked after certain criteria are met, and each difficulty has a different amount of charges on the save device. On both easy and beginner, they both have 99 charges. Normal drops at 99 down to 64, and hard mode drops you off even further to 16 because the developers hate you. One thing that beginner also gives you is an unlimited charge gun right off the bat, which kind of eliminates any real challenge the game has, but it's a good way to get used to how guns perform if you want some more hands-on experience. One thing that hard mode does that isn't the same with the other modes is it takes away your ability to move backwards to charge up a shot. I'm guessing Laura got her foot stuck on some space gum or something, I don't know. I ended up playing the game on easy mode for this video and streamed it on my Twitch channel for the spooky game of October. That's too many! I don't need to go about there. I think I'm fine. And I found the difficulty to be a pleasant enough ride throughout. It was challenging, but it wasn't too overbearing. The other difficulties are there for you if easy is too easy for you. Along with that, beginner is also there if you find easy too hard. The game's not overly long either. I think it took me around about 4 hours to beat the entire game. Even shorter if you know what you're doing. So, with gameplay focused on the scares and mechanics focused on stressing you out with resource management, does the level design and story take advantage of these? As I said before, if you start on the game for the first time, you'll start on disc 0. This isn't just because of the training mode, but it's also because the opening cutscene to the game's on here. There's no other way of watching it, not even on disc 1 when you start the game proper, it will just go straight to gameplay. The opening shows a door with E0 on it, bursting open and something coming out. Laura's taken out from her sub-zero nap and tries to call someone to see what's going on. Her friend Parker picks up the call and tries to talk, but it looks like the sound has been cut out, so you don't really know what Parker's saying. But shortly after picking up, something breaks into the room and Parker unfortunately meets his end. Then you swap over to disc 1 and start the game. When you load up disc 1, you're then shown Laura's room. Here, you can look on her PC, try and call some people, only for them all to decline, how rude, and to bring up the map. You will need this map. Remember this map. After collecting some stuff that you need to progress, you will then leave and be sent to the traversal side of the game. Here, there's no on-screen map, so I hope you remembered the map layout, otherwise you'd be walking around lost. And that's the main gameplay loop. You'll traverse the ship and look into each room for bits and pieces, solving any puzzles while avoiding the constant threat of losing progress. So, once you leave your room, you're supposed to go to one of the other rooms on the floor that you're on and go onto the PC there to turn off all the locks in the area of the ship that you're in. I'm sure the monsters won't use this to their advantage. Then, you can go to your locker, where you'll find, well, your locker. And this is where the game tells you to pay attention, because if you forgot to grab Laura's keycard from her room when the game started, well, I hope you remember the way there. In the locker is a keycard that you can use to get to the lower area of the ship. The lower area is where Parker's room is, which is where we need to go. However, it won't be a leisurely stroll, as one of the aliens has made its home right outside Parker's room, which is less than convenient. With no way to defend ourselves, we need to keep an ear out for the monster using the ding system I mentioned previously. Using that system to pinpoint where the monster is so we can walk around it, avoiding the risk of getting our eyes gouged out. One thing you might notice while playing the game, especially in this area, is that the monsters move quite slow in this. It may sound threatening having the dings ring constantly in your ears, but as long as you're always on the move, they will very rarely catch up to you, unless you're walking directly at them or standing still. So what this area shows the player is you don't need to kill every monster in the game, you can just move around them. After some light espionage action, we find our way into Parker's room and confirm that, yes, he is dead. But after some snooping around, we find the access code to Kimberly's phone, meaning we can now call her. So, hopping on Parker's PC, we give her a call and find, oh no, she also has no audio. But it's good to know that one of our friends is still alive. Heading back upstairs, making sure to avoid the monster from before, we find that one has broken out upstairs, making a mess of things going from door to door. It's even killed one of the shipmates called Marcus. So, doing what any normal person would do, we pick up his fingers, use those fingers to open a safe and get his gun. Now with a way to defend ourselves, we can take out the monster that's been rampaging around, and also the one that took out Parker. A nice little detail that the game added is, if you do go back down and take out the monster that killed our friend, there's a little animation that plays afterwards. We can of course ignore them, but I'm sorry, you killed my friend, you must perish. Since there's nothing else to do on this floor, we hop onto an elevator to try and meet up with our friend Kimberly, only to get ambushed and we lose our gun. So, that was nice while it lasted. Running away from our sneaky assailant, we bump into a dead end. However, before we meet our grisly demise, we hear Kimberly from above telling us to jump into the air vents. So, using the C button, we look up to find that the entryway into the air vents has been opened. And since there's nowhere else for us to go, we climb up. This is the only time that this mechanic's really used. You can always use the C button to look up and down, but it's not really needed for gameplay, other than this one part. So, we slowly climb into the air vent. It's okay, Laura, take your time. And we make our way into the first real maze of the game. There are 2 monsters here, but we have no gun. This is a problem. There are also conveyor belts which can be used to help and hinder us. If you go on one that's going the same direction as you're moving, you'll go faster. The opposite applies if you're going up one that's going the other direction. This also applies to the monsters. So, if you're running up one conveyor belt which is going against you, and an alien sees you and goes on it as well, it can just zoom right into you, causing a game over. Our main focus while we're here is to find some way to defend ourselves. We did just lose our gun, but there has to be more than one lying around here somewhere. After scurrying around, we find another locker room with a computer. After interacting with the computer, it tells us, no, don't touch me there. However, we can still take the keycard that is nestled in the computer itself. Using this keycard, we can open the locker that's also in the room, giving us another gun. Unfortunately, unlike the previous gun, this one only holds 3 charges, so I hope you're a good shot. And you don't act like me, who wasted all 3 shots from the get-go trying to hit one alien. What do you mean? Oh, that's annoying. That's all the charges. I'd used all 3 charges in one go. You're not completely defenseless though. You can recharge these guns at certain charge points, and there is one here hidden in the maze. So if you do waste all 3 shots like I did, there is a way to recharge the gun. And you will need at least 1 charge, because to even get out of the maze, you will need to blow up this door. Again, only time the game does this. Once you've done this, you finally meet up with Kimberly, one of the best characters in the game. There's such a warmth with her interactions towards Laura, you can tell she genuinely cares. After catching up and being glad that they're not dead, they decide to call the other team members to try and see who's still alive. David seems to be okay, however, the other teammates are not. Calling Parker's phone in front of Kim, you see her break down.
Parker! Oh, please, Parker! Ah!
She then talks about how her and Parker were intimate. Hell, Laura was even at her wedding. which is surprising because Laura seems to be taking this as it's brand new news. Wanting some time to collect her thoughts, she decides to walk off for a little bit, which probably isn't the best idea since the ship is still infested with invisible aliens that can kill very easily. Calling David again to talk about how nice it is being alive, you realise that Laura and David are also together. It looks like being put under cryosleep has some sort of effect on your memory. David mentions that he's been hurt, and that you and Kimberly should walk all the way to where he is, which, bearing in mind the ship is full of invisible enemies, yeah, sure, why not? Not like we've got anything better to do. After this, Kimberly walks back in and says, yeah, let's go and meet up with the other guys. By the way, David's so reliable. To which I say, dude's asking us to walk through a monster-infected ship. What do you mean he's reliable? And that's the end of Disc 1. If you thought the plot was interesting and you don't want to be spoiled, you can skip ahead to here to hear my final thoughts. However, if you don't really care, please continue watching. Disc 2 starts off with Laura and Kimberly walking down an aisle, with Kim giving some unique advice on how to proceed.
It's to stare your enemy in the eyes and never, ever look away. Just like taking care of a baby. That's right. This time, our enemy is nothing but a spoiled little brat.
Kim, the monsters are invisible. You can't look at them in the eyes. You can't look at them, period. What are you on about? After she chooses to go in by herself to get the access codes for the main elevator, she is quickly ambushed, and not wanting to leave our friend in the dirt, we run after them to help. After running to her aid, we find there's a big blood splatter, and the gun that we lent her. So we press onto the service elevator to try and get the access codes for the big main one. There are a lot of elevators in this game. But to even use the service elevator, we need to go through one of the more complicated puzzles in the game. Do you know binary? Well, you're gonna have to. To condense it into a really simple matter, it basically consists of two numbers, 1 and 0. Each digit in a sequence is called a bit, or binary digit. And depending on where they are in a sequence, it will increase the size of the factor by 2. So, to get 5 as an example, you will need 101. It is using coding, and it's not really something anybody will know on the top of their head. Now, you're probably wondering, Chaz, why the binary lesson? Well, the only way to operate the service elevator is through binary. The switches representing 1 and 0, 1 being down, 0 being up. So, to get to level 7 where we need to go, we need to put all of the switches in the up position. This isn't the only area of the game that uses binary though. Soon after this, we need to decipher a code that's in binary to be able to enter one of our crewmates' rooms. So after figuring out the binary to get to floor 7 and figuring out the binary code to enter this door, we go in to check on our friend Ronnie, to find out that Ronnie has also met his untimely demise. However, this isn't the first dead body that we've seen today. We investigate the corpse to find his Ray-Bans and we put them on while looking at his calendar. Only to find that he's hidden his computer password on the calendar for some reason. Entering this into the PC, we can snoop around his files and we find one called Aki, which reveals that the whole mission was to get these invisible creatures over to our contractor so they can use them as potential BOWs, and that the life of the monster is a higher priority than the life of the crew. Basically meaning that everybody who works on that ship is seen as disposable by them. After reading it, Laura has a very natural response and breaks down crying. Which, let's face it, I can understand. If you're fighting tooth and nail to even survive, only to find out that your employer views the life of those things that are trying to kill you as more important, I will probably be very upset as well. This also helps humanize Laura, because one issue I had with several games that do the find a note and read it kind of storytelling is the characters don't react. One common example I can think of is in Resident Evil, where you find a picture of your then boss Albert Wesker standing amongst other Umbrella scientists in Resident Evil 1. Chris or Jill, depending on who you play as, just look at this photo and then don't do anything. Where's your reaction? That's your boss. You should be surprised. You should have questions. You should be going, hold up, what's this? Why is he here? Instead of just not doing anything. Anyway, tangent over, back to the game. Going down to level 5, we run in and see our pal George, the one who didn't want us going on his computer before, and after checking that he's still alive and well, we then go to see our partner David. And after a romantic reunion, he goes off to check on the storage room, despite the fact that he said he took damage before, so I just think he didn't want to make the journey, the lazy bum. After snooping around and finding a picture of ourselves on his bed, we then go to talk to George, who might be a little bit too attached to Laura.
Laura, when you have a problem, come directly to me first. There is only one person who understands you, and that is me.
Since there's nothing for us to do up here, we go down to the storage area where David said he was going to. Unfortunately, it looks like we were too late, as the monsters have already got David. We also find out that David's a robot. And this isn't just news to us, as not even David was aware of this. After he passes, we yoink the brain chip out of his head and make our way back upstairs, and immediately upload his brain chip onto George's PC to see if we can at least try and shed some light on what's going on here. Unfortunately, Laura forgot to turn on the ding system and we got ourselves ambushed, the alien trying to force us to drink its sweet, sweet fluids. Thankfully, George saves us from possible inflation, and he sees that we've been snooping around on his PC. But before we can ask him any questions, he starts to act defensively, reflectively, and also tries to gaslight us, so yeah, just a little bit suspicious.
What did you see? The file on David? I don't know anything. I'm only... Look, don't you know it was rude looking into someone else's things without permission? I have no obligation to explain anything to you at all.
He then runs off, but not before dropping some sort of key in the hallway. So, we're now infected with something weird, and we need to scan ourselves somewhere. Thankfully, our friend Robbie has a scanner in his room. Back up to floor 7 we go. Once we're there, we use Ronnie's medical scanning device to scan ourselves. And we can see that the alien has put some weird thing in our neck. I'm going to call it Timmy. Along with this, we also find out that we're also a robot, just like David. But before Laura can break down even further from this, George comes in and starts talking about resetting us to factory settings. Not liking the sound of that, Laura makes a run for it. With no real place left to go, we run back into David's room, where George is very quick on our tail. Unfortunately for him, like what we did earlier, he forgot to put on his ding device, so he gets caught unawares. And, as thanks for saving us from the person who's trying to reset us, we shoot the alien in the face. My main issue with this entire segment is there's a lot of back and forth. We're going up the elevator, then down the elevator, then back up it again, having to figure out the binary puzzle each time. And then watching the cutscenes, it can kind of feel like a drag, since there isn't really that many monsters around this area apart from the one that's in the basement area with David. It's around here where I wish there was a skip cutscene button for the ones that you keep on watching time and time again. So, with George now dead, we're the only ones that seem to be alive at the moment. Great. We loot George's body for the access card and then make our way down to the power room on floor 6. This is a maze. Simple as. There's one monster roaming around, but this space is so big and there's so many rooms that it's hard to even pinpoint where the monster is. Is it in the room with you now, or is it in the corridor next to you? It's really hard to tell. When streaming this myself, I often found myself just running around in circles. You can use PCs in this disc and get the map layout of the area, maybe screenshot it or jot it down on a piece of paper. That will help a lot with this, but if you go in blind, you will run yourself around in circles. After enough trial and error, mostly error, we find ourselves at the power room, and after turning the power back on, we're back in business. Now to jump back into the elevator and set course to the first floor. This floor is just one long shaft. We use George's keycard on the keypad in front of us, and we find ourselves in the main elevator. Like I said, there's a lot of elevator usage in this game. And, since it's the first time that we can relax since the game started, Laura takes a seat, but not before Timmy decides to make a nuisance of himself and start flaring out, causing her some severe neck pain. After riding the pain out, the elevator stops and we make our way out. And that's the end of Disc 2. Not as strong as the first disc. I feel like the first disc was a lot better at keeping the scares going. In disc 2, like I said earlier, there's a lot of back and forth. It feels like this disc is a lot more character focused, which is alright, but after the strong start of disc 1, it does feel like the game's slowing down a bit. Disc 3, however, throws you right into the thick of it from the get-go. It starts off with a multi-level gauntlet. So make sure you save before leaving this elevator, because if you die, and you will die, it's back to disc 2 with you. You have to make your way down 9 floors, each different from the last, and the game throws these smaller monsters at you, which can be seen, which is good, and they don't require you to charge up your gun, but you can't detect them using your ding device. They do make their own noise though, so it's not all bad. However, like with their invisible brethren, one touch, and it is game over. Thankfully, however, partway through the gauntlet, you find David's helmet with his fully loaded gun which never runs out of energy in it. Sweet, so now you can shoot with reckless abandon. You can also save here, so it's a nice little checkpoint between the 9 levels. After making your way down the 9 levels, you'll find what seems to be a giant beating heart. No idea what this is, it's not really detailed in the game's plot from what I can see, but like most things you don't understand, you shoot at it and it perishes. Making our way through the hole we just shot through the heart, we meet back with Kimberly, who managed to survive the entire time. She also gets rid of Timmy, so that's a bonus. She details that she's been in on the entire mission from the start, knowing about the monsters that are on the ship, and also says that Parker was aware as well. And, while it's touching to see two friends reunite, I have several questions. First, why not tell Laura and David? If they're robots, why the secrecy? Second, she mentions that Laura and David were at their wedding. Did they get married on the ship on the way to the mission, or was it before? If it was before, why were Laura and David there if there were robots to help with the mission? Third, why did the alien try and put something in Laura's neck instead of just outright killing her? Lastly, if they were made to help with the mission, what's their purpose? Why program robots with such complex human emotions if it's just to help with this? I do understand that I'm nitpicking here. It's obviously not the point of the game's plot, and who knows, I might have missed some lore somewhere that explains everything I just asked. But these issues just spring into mind when I'm playing this game. After the joyful reunion, Kim activates the ship's self-destruct sequence before asking Laura to leave because Kim's not going with her. Parker is waiting for her, which is a bit ominous since Parker's dead. Not wanting to see her friend go, we give chase. However, unfortunately we are too late. Kim takes her own life to be there with Parker, and we get to see Laura react to losing yet another person she cares deeply about. Honestly, I just feel bad for Laura at this point. The whole scene is done well. Laura's reaction is great, conveying the emotions that one would go through seeing a traumatic scene such as this. After reading their chat logs, we are interrupted with the ship reminding us that it is going to explode any time now. So we run back to where the escape shuttle was, only for our pinging device to give up the ghost on the final stretch. Missing our only way to detect the monsters, we're practically sitting ducks right now. Before losing to despair, however, we are joined by David, who, somehow, was able to upload himself to the ship's intercom. Being a robot has its perks, I guess. He then acts as our pinging device, telling us where to go and if there's monsters nearby.
Forward. The enemy is near. Go right.
It's a really well done part and helps build tension as you only have his voice to go off. Once you make your way through, you board the escape ship and we jet out of here, the station exploding behind us. Not wanting to sit down and do nothing for God knows how many years, we decide to head back to cryosleep, with David keeping tabs on the ship for us, uploading his consciousness onto the escape ship. And that's the end of the game. Roll the credits. There is no game like Enemy Zero. No, wait, no. Let me rephrase that. There is no game that feels like Enemy Zero. The gameplay loop is completely unique. This save system, while similar to Resident Evil's ink ribbon system, goes even further with it. The framing of the cutscenes make it feel like a movie, and the music helps elevate the sad moments to be all the more tragic. It's a boiling pot of different systems, all working together in tandem to make something truly unique, and I love it. It's a downright travesty that there's no legit way to play this on modern systems outside of emulation. This is the very kind of game that emulation is made for, because without that, there would be no real way to play this game without forking over some money on eBay. It's not perfect, however. As neat of an idea the chiming system is, when there are multiple enemies around, it becomes really hard to keep tabs on where things are. If there was going to be a remake or remaster of some sort, making it so the chimes will come from the left or right speaker when they're around there would help a lot when it comes to trying to locate where the monsters are. I understand why this was not available at the time. Stereo speakers were not the norm back then, so locking out some of the player base because they lacked the proper speakers probably would not go down well back then. Along with this, as much as I do love the cutscenes, making some of them skippable would help a lot, because whenever you die in the game, you're booted back to the start, so you have to sit through several FMVs of Laura holding the recording device, listening to the audio log, and then boom, you're back in the game, all unskippable. So it adds a lot to the aggravation of dying constantly. Adding a skip function would make the process seem more streamlined. However, I understand that these are just nitpicks. The game is perfectly playable as it is, and it's not long at all. As stated previously, it only took me under 5 hours to beat the game, and that's with dying several times. Unfortunately, as much as I sing the game's praises, the game has been sent to the realms of obscurity, forever destined to be a bizarre footnote in the Sega Saturn's varied library. Maybe in the future, the game will be able to strike out of that slump. There was a PC release, so who knows, like D before it, it might get released on that storefront someday, and it will be able to scare a new generation of people with its unique gameplay style again. All we can do is keep an ear out. Just a heads up, I'm taking a big old context warning here. Viewer digression is advised. How can you describe a game like mouthwashing? Horror? Certainly. Walking sim? It has more puzzles than just walking, so I don't really think that counts. Bizarre? Sure. Amazing? Without a doubt in my mind. When my friend first recommended the game to me, I did not know what I was getting myself into. I thought it would just be another quirky horror game with a PS1 aesthetic. But after playing it for myself, it is one of the best experiences I have had this year, and it needs to be experienced blind. Space itself is terrifying. It is an endless expanse that stretches beyond the edges of the universe, with a whole lot of nothing in there. So imagine being adrift in that endless, empty expanse, with no hope of rescue, and no hope of saving yourself. How would you handle it? The constant dread, the creeping uneasiness, the steady annoyance of your fellow crewmates. Would you keep your head above water, trying to become like a rock for people to rest on? Or will you succumb to the torrent, losing yourself to the abyss? How will you face the end of the road? As much as people would like to say, "Ha, I will not succumb to bad thoughts, my mind is an island," you don't really know how you will react when the bad times come knocking. And games that explore that are forever fascinating to me. How will this playable character overcome these stressful situations? How would I, as the player, feel with how the character I'm playing as dealing with these situations? What if, at the end of the day, the character that I'm playing as is not a good person? Mouthwashing is a short 2 to 3 hour experience, but it is one that has burrowed itself into my brain. The moment I clicked end stream, I opened up Word and started writing this script. I need to talk about this game, and I hope you all listen, and I hope it will hurt. Mouthwashing was made by a company called Wrong Organ, whose previous game was called How Fish is Made. Both games can be found on Steam at the moment. Mouthwashing's plot is non-linear. You jump between the past, present, and future, and are told bits and pieces of plots at seemingly random times. So because of this, I'm just going to slap a big old spoiler warning here. Talking about the game is impossible without mentioning something about its plot, and this game is at its best when you don't know anything about it. Looking at the clues the game gives you and then putting them together bit by bit is honestly one of the best gaming experiences I've had this year. The game is not long either, it takes about 2 to 3 hours as I said earlier, so please play it before watching anything else in this video. I'll still be here. Okay, you play the game? Yes? Great! Let's begin. The game is based through the eyes of Curly, the ship's captain, and the eyes of Jimmy, the second in command. Curly is someone who takes everybody into account and feels the responsibility of having everybody's expectation on his shoulders, while Jimmy, well, we'll get back to him. They are both pilots of the space freighter that is destined to crash and leave the crew stuck there. The game takes place both before and after this event, and the game shows you snippets of what's going on. You are joined by other members of the crew. You have Anya, the ship's medic, who appears to be quite squeamish about her job. However, if you read into it a bit more, you can tell there's something deeper going on. Swansea, a rough around the edges engineer, who shares his name with a Welsh city, although I'm not too sure if that was intentional or not. And finally, you have Daisuke, the youngest member of the crew, and he's an intern for Swansea, supposedly helping with engineering jobs, although helping might be a strong word if you take Swansea's description into account. The game really makes an effort to make these characters feel more than just one note. They each feel like they've got their own dreams, their own aspirations, and they've each got their own demons that they're facing during this very hard and troubled time. So, with the introductions out the way, what kind of game is Mouthwashing? The game, at its core, is an adventure game. You pick things up to use on things. There are bits where the game deviates going for something more horror focused, but for most of the playthrough it follows a adventure game kind of mentality. You go through each section talking to people and experiencing things, and overall the game controls really well. It uses the typical WASD movement on keyboards, interacting with things with left click, opening your inventory with tab, pretty standard fare as adventure games go. One thing that I can think of that I can count as a critique is that sometimes it's not really clear what can be interacted with and what can't. There were times I was clicking on seemingly anything, trying to figure out what it is the game wanted me to do, but that could just be because of my small goober gamer brain. Music and sound are also both fantastic here. They really help with the feeling of uneasiness. Sometimes I swear I'm hearing sounds that are not there, heaping on the paranoia as I walk down these dark hallways. Sometimes it helps to act as a warning, alerting you to footsteps or where some things are in relation to you. Other times it's there to make you feel uncomfortable, like when you feed Curly's pain medication. Go on, take your meds, Curly. Good stuff. Along with this, you have the design of the ship itself. You don't really go anywhere else in this game, it's pretty much contained in just the one ship, and they make great use of the space. Before long, you'll be able to know where to go without wandering around. It's well thought out. The visuals as well are also great. They look to be going for the PS1 style with the low poly characters and the location geometry, and the colours used really help the overall look pop out. I personally love the look of the main lounge, with the big old TV being used as mood lighting for some of the scenes, changing depending on what point in time you're in. They all use the visuals for great effect, especially when things start to become less normal. So, overall, the package itself is quite charming, and all of these are used to tell a story that is just fantastic when jumped into blind. The foreshadowing that you won't pick up until certain things come to light. Some things are only noticeable as well when you read between the lines. That being said though, the context warning at the start of the video, important. I do mean it. Be wary before watching this video. If you are still here, then I'm going to assume you're okay with me talking about these kind of things. So, if that's the case, let's begin. The game starts off with you in the cockpit, with text saying 0 days before the crash, which is a tad bit ominous. And after looking around, you go to the main console and see that there's a collision about to happen with some sort of space mass, and that you should turn left to avoid it. So naturally you turn right. Okay, I did not mean to do that. Thankfully, the autopilot kicks in and saves our asses, only for us to turn the autopilot off. Wait, what? So we seem to be making the situation worse for now. Let's just get out the cockpit. Running along the corridor, it starts to shift. Rooms get repeated and sounds start to play. Some groans of the ship and what seems to be a baby crying from somewhere. After reaching what seems to be a dead end, we turn around and find this thing. And before we can contemplate what's going on, we fast forward 2 months after the crash. We are joined by the fellow crew members of the ship, talking about the situation we're in, and since they need a way to get more supplies, the option of opening the cargo hold and seeing what's there comes to mind. Swansea shoots down the idea. He has that money grind set, you see, and does not want us opening the cargo hold getting in the way of his fat stacks of money. But we're the captain now, so we can just sidestep where he thinks and do what we want. Speaking of captains, if you go into the medical bay, you can see Curly on the bed, the previous captain, who seems to have flown the ship into the space mass, starting this whole mess. What seems to have happened is, after the impact of the space mass, the ship, for lack of a better word, foamed up, which is why there's so much foam everywhere. However, this means that some areas of the ship are inaccessible because there's a massive wall of foam in the way, like with what's going on with utility. As Swansea said, it's just one giant wall of foam. Speaking to Anya, who's also medical, she asks if you can give Curly his pain meds, because apparently the noise that he makes is that horrific she can't do it herself. We push back a bit at first, but ultimately agree to do it. It is worth noting that before Jimmy agrees to give Curly his pain medication, he does make quite a mean-spirited remark towards Anya. After giving Curly his pain meds, we check up on Anya again, where she asks why did he do it? Why did he pilot the ship into the space mass, dooming everybody to suffer with him? And then says, I have to believe that our worst moments don't make us monsters. Jimmy points out that he tried to take everyone down with him and that everybody only wants to keep him alive for one reason or another. So because of this dialogue, we can deduce that the person we were playing as at the beginning of the game was Curly, setting the ship onto the collision course which set the events of this game into motion. After checking the cockpit and getting the code scanner, we make our way down to the cargo hold, where we can finally see what's actually in there. What are we carrying across the vast reaches of space? Only for us to be taken 7 days before the crash. Anya's doing a psychological evaluation on the team as part of a routine checkup, to make sure no one's going down the deep end. And we're back to playing as Curly by the looks of it. There's only one more evaluation to do, which is Jimmy's, and it doesn't seem to be taking things that seriously. So, we go to talk to him, only to hear that there's some issues in the utility room, and, as we are the captain, it's on us to fix it. Looks like Daisuke's all foamed up after trying to get into a busted air vent. Helping Daisuke out of his foaming issue, we go back to check in Jim's psych evaluation, but he wants to do it in the cockpit for some reason. So, we make our way there and... I don't think we're on the ship anymore. As you wander this red, watery landscape, ladders start sprouting up from the water. Eventually, sirens will start blaring out, and warning signs will pop out from seemingly nowhere. Finally, the scene ends with what looks to be Bahamut's attack from Final Fantasy XIV engulfing the entire area. And, before you can question what's going on, you're back in the cockpit. After making our way out of that Evangelion episode, we finally meet up with Jimmy, and the two start to have a little chat about how things are. Curly expresses having doubts about his position in life, wondering if his current job is enough for him. Sure, he's successful, but is that all he can do? Has he hit that glass ceiling, so to speak? The uncertainty of trying something new, not knowing if he'll pass or fail at it. Is it worth risking it all to see if it'll work, or should he just stick to what he knows? Jimmy points out that he has reached the top of his ladder, nowhere else to go, and that there are many other ladders out there. Either way, it's a ways down, and after their heart-to-heart, they get a letter sent to them from corporate, and before we can read it, we are sent to... some place. Looks to be the cargo hold, but there's a big old CRTV in there. We start to flick through some of the channels, seeing all sorts of shows, up until we come across an advert for some mouthwash. And then we go back to 2 months after the crash. Turns out the cargo that we have is mouthwash. All the boxes, mouthwash. We can't even use it for medical reasons as there's too much sugar content in it to actually disinfect anything. Swansea, however, decides, you've got nothing better to do, and starts drinking it. Don't drink mouthwash, kids. It's not good for you. So the situation is turning pretty dire, resorting to mouthwash as some sort of alcohol substitute. Before everyone breaks down to despair, however, we're sent back to 6 days before the crash. Our objective here is to break the news to the team, and guessing by Curly's thoughts when you highlight the letter on the tab screen, it's not good news. However, before we can ruin everybody's day, it's time for a birthday party. Yours to be exact. After walking around and making a cake, because for some bizarre reason the captain's the only one who can do that, you then break the news to the crew, and understandably they're not too happy with the news. However, Jimmy seems to go out of his way to paint Curly as this evil individual. He really digs into him and just puts more and more pressure on. It's a hard scene to watch. And after we cut some cake, we're flung back into the future. We wake up and decide to go for a stroll. This groaning noise going on throughout the ship. Going to check on Curly, we don't know if he's been given his meds. So, off we go to find Anya. We find Anya and Swansea both talking in the cockpit. We don't know what they're talking about, but whatever it is, it seems to be making Anya cry. Anya mentions that she hasn't given Curly his pain medication yet, so we offer to do it instead. And we go up to see Curly. Jimmy makes some comments about what everyone is thinking, also mentioning something Anya will do. Not too sure what's going on in Jimmy's headspace at the moment, but anyway. Give Curly his pain meds, a bit aggressively this time by the sounds of it. And suddenly we're in the lobby with Curly. Since there's nothing else for us to do, we sit down next to our slightly overcooked friend and have a chat. Decide what's going on. He just really wants to have some really bad cake with his friend. So we oblige. Only issue is, there's no knife around here, so off we go to find one. Looking around, we can't find a knife, however we have this axe. Not quite the same as a knife, but close enough, right? Why does it say feast? Why are there eyeballs all over the screen? Why is Curly on the table? What are we doing with that axe? Fast forward to 4 months after the crash. We find Daisuke on the floor having one too many mouthwashes. Anya herself is thinking about drinking it just because there's nothing else that we can do. But before that, she mentions that there's a medicine cabinet that should be easy enough to get to if we can just get rid of some of the foam. However, slight issue with that, Swansea has the axe. Because of this, we need to talk to him and ask if we can borrow it off him. However, just look at him. Look at those vibes, look at those moves. He is one of that axe. Who are we to get in the way of that? Anyway, we ask him for the axe, and he helps by lodging it into the big screen behind him, shattering the screen. Looks like after 4 months, morale has taken a very quick nosedive. Swans is being very abrupt to Jimmy, almost aggressive, almost like he doesn't like him that much, like he did something to make him feel that way. Anyway, no point thinking about it. Axe collected, foam wall removed, medicines received. Speaking to Anya, she asks you to give Curly the painkillers that you've found, and Jimmy starts to moan about being asked to do things. It's almost like he's the captain of the ship, and with that has responsibilities. But what do I know? When we go up to Curly to give him the meds, Jimmy expresses that he didn't understand the responsibility that being a captain entailed, and then we're sent 6 hours until judgment. We're stuck in the cockpit, and Swansea is trying to get in, a bit aggressively. So we barricade the door, only for him to smash it, and then we're flung back 2 days before the crash. Curly's talking to Anya. Anya can't seem to sleep. She first asks how long do we have left on the trip, which is about 8 months. She then asks, why does Pony Express put a lock on the medical room, but not on the sleeping quarters? We say that maybe it's for safety, but before we can divulge any further into that, we're then flung into 5 months after the crash. Daisuke comes up running to Jimmy and says Anya is trapped in medical and needs our help. So we make our way there, only to find out that Anya's actually locked the door on the inside. The door's not jammed, she's just keeping it locked. Jimmy says that she can't keep breaking down after each little hardship, which, as you can imagine, does not go down well. She goes on to say how Jimmy was right and that she should have done this a long time ago, which does not sound good at all. Trying to find a way in, the busted air vent from before comes into play. It's dangerous, but it's the only way in. However, Swansea's not letting us in there, so now what? Before we can think up a plan, we're then sent 8 hours until judgment. When we spawn in, we see Daisuke's on the floor with a gaping wound. I'm guessing the air vent plan didn't go too well. It's okay though. Jimmy will fix everything somehow, as he keeps saying he always does. First, we need to disinfect the wound, but the medical alcohol that was in the medicine cabinet from before was used on something, we don't quite know what. Making our way to the cargo hold is looking a bit different. For this segment, we're trying to get to the end of the cargo bay, but something is stopping us. If we make too much noise, it will get us and send us back to the start. Walking makes noise. Running makes a lot of noise. So you need to pay attention to where the monster is, walking when it's far, not moving at all when it's right underneath you. The monster, by the way, is some gigantic monstrous pony. I'm guessing all that time on the Pony Express is really starting to take its toll on Jimmy's mental state. But making our way for the maze, we go to the end where we find mouthwash. But we shouldn't use this as disinfectant though, right? Anya said so herself. The sugar content is far too high. Oh, you're just going to do it anyway. Okay, cool. We were then sent back to before Daisuke went into the vents. We need to find a way to knock out Swansea. What better way to get someone knocked out than with alcohol? And we have this disinfectant alcohol. Oh, god damn it, Jimmy. So we make a scuffed cocktail, which Swansea takes, but not before giving Daisuke a talking to. One thing that I feel like needs to be said is the alcohol itself says that if someone drinks it, it could cause serious harm. However, Jimmy doesn't seem to care about that. So he drinks the cocktail and passes out on the floor. But hey, at least we finally have the key to utility, and making our way in there, we find that it's been kind of unaffected by the foam, which is strange since Swansea said that it's like a wall of foam early on in the game. But looking at it now, it looks relatively unaffected. So what's going on? What has Swansea been doing all by himself if the room has not been touched? There's one cryostasis pod that is untouched and usable and can keep someone alive in there for about 20 years. So, according to Jimmy, it looks like Swansea's been keeping one of these pods a secret for some reason. Jimmy's mind goes straight to, he's waiting for us all to die and jump in the pod to save himself. However, we can't really ask him questions since he's knocked out on the floor. So, not much we can do right now. Let's send Daisuke up into the vent. Looking at it, and to be honest, I don't like Daisuke's chances in there, and I'd think that even if we don't know what happens in the future. But Jimmy says it must be done, so he goes in and... Yep. Good job, Jimmy. We're then flung one day before the crash. Okay, back to playing as Curly, and what are we doing now? What do you mean, find the gun? We find Anya having what looks to be a breakdown in the cockpit. Talking to her, Curly realizes that while Anya has been giving the team psych evaluations, no one has been giving her one. Curly says that he would help her if she told him, as the crew are his responsibility. To that, Anya responds that she's pregnant. Now, remember when she says that the bedroom doors are not locked? She didn't want that gun to hurt herself, she wanted it to defend herself. Think back to when all the beds were in the lounge. Notice how Anya's bed is right in front of the pony statue, which makes noises when it detects movement. I feel like I don't need to paint a picture of what happened. The game is very apparent of what happened to Anya, and by the looks of it, Cody knows who did it as well without Anya saying anything. So that means he either knew what happened and did nothing, or he has an idea on who did it and still chooses to do nothing. Either way, Curly's in the wrong. It's disgusting behavior, and if we take everything into account, we can kind of figure out who did the disgusting act already. But on the off chance people don't know, I will wait until the game outright states it before saying anything. We leave the room and we're back to a bleeding Daisuke, and Swansea decides to take him out as a gesture of mercy. Jimmy's saying that he could have fixed it, but Swansea's taking none of it, and states that it's the end of the line for all of them. Taking Daisuke out was an act of mercy. We accuse Swansea of plotting something to save himself, telling Anya things to make it unhinged, only for Swansea to say, oh, we did talk, but it was her telling me all sorts of things instead. We go to find the gun from earlier, and checking medical, we see that Anya has taken her own life. The stress of what she has gone through is still going through, being trapped in a small ship adrift in space with the very person who abused you. It all got too much and she overdoses on painkillers. The gun case is nearby, getting the code from the cockpit. We open the safety box to get the gun, and Cody starts to laugh at us, finally acknowledging that Anya was right about how much of a monster Jimmy actually is, and realizing that it's too late for him to do anything. All he can do is watch. And Swansea, finally fed up with Jimmy, starts to rush him with the axe. And then we're back to day 0, the day of the crash, where we saw what looked to be Curly driving the ship into the giant space mass at the beginning of the game. Curly talks to Anya, who says that she told the person who was her that she is pregnant, to which Curly just goes, "I was going to do that, why didn't you ask?" which is not the best response out there. We go to the cockpit and see Jimmy is there, waiting for us. We talk to Jimmy, saying how we will fix this. Jimmy is asking what will happen to him when he gets back to Earth, and Jim starts to shift the blame onto Curly, saying that he said he'll keep everything under control. It was his responsibility. Jimmy says he can make it all disappear and walks off to the cockpit while Curly watches. Curly is dazed and starts to run to the cockpit while warning signs are blaring. We see Jimmy sitting down panicking. We then rush to the driver's seat and then... What kind of character is Jimmy? At first, you think he's just someone who was put into the driver's seat because the captain drove too close to some sort of space mass. But the more you play, the more layers get peeled away. He keeps saying he will fix things, but makes them worse. He belittles Anya and the rest of the crew constantly. He Anya on top of that. When people try to push against him and try to suggest another path forward, he ignores them or tries to force them to do what he says. He blames everybody else for what is happening, when at the end of it all, everything that's happened in this game is because of him. He is the reason the ship crashed. He is the reason for every death on that ship. He is, at his core, a selfish, manipulative, cowardly, sorry excuse for you human, and we're stuck playing as him. Think back to the beginning of the game, when you're running down the endless hallways. There seems to be a baby making noise. This links up with what Anya told him just before the crash. Curly looks at you at all times when you're near him, and during gameplay, you might think it's a little creepy addition to the game, but now, you know why that is. It's because he knows what you did. He knows that everything is your fault. Swansea's aggressiveness towards you isn't just because of his nature, it's because Anya told him what you did. He's only hateful towards you. Once the reveal is shown, suddenly everything starts to make sense. Curly, despite his mental decline, never had any clear signs he wanted to end it all. Whenever you play as him, you can tell that he cares about the crew, and that itself is his own flaw. His care about the crew as a whole is why he didn't do anything to Jimmy, as it could have caused issues down the line. However, he should have dissented the brig. Hell, he should have sent them out of the airlock. But instead, he tried to play mediator and figure out a way in which everybody gets away happy, which in cases like this is just not possible. To make an analogy, dental care. Bear with me on this. If you don't brush your teeth, but instead use nothing but mouthwash, sure, your mouth will smell and possibly look nice, but the grime and decay will still be there, festering, making teeth worse. It's a surface level fix. In order to make sure it's in tip-top shape, you need to get in there, brush your teeth, floss, remove all that grime. It's more work, but it's needed at the end of the day to have a healthy system. Curly did not do that. He wanted the surface level fix, and unfortunately, the rest of the crew had to pay for that mistake. Now, all we can do is take responsibility. Jimmy finds Swansea and they have one last chat before he puts him to rest for good. Not before he calls Jimmy out for what he is, in what I think is one of the best scenes in the game. Swansea talking about how accomplishments don't feel as good as you expect when you get them, people pushing themselves for the next big thing. All of it sounds like things you hear people talking about. How often have you worked on something, only for, when it's finished, you don't feel as happy as you thought you would? Drawn something, only to think you could do better. Finish that one big project, only to feel that you need to work on the next one. All of these things that you hear people talk about is what causes burnout. Swansea's one of the best characters in the game. At first I thought he was just an ass, but the more you look into him, the more you realise that that rough outer shell is not because he hates you, it's because he hates himself. That cryopod he was looking after, it was not for him to save himself. One of my friends said that they think that Swansea would have used it on Daisuke, as he was the youngest and he did show great remorse when he killed him, which makes a lot of sense to me. Anyway, Jimmy puts him down and then continues on with the Jimmy's mental decline ride. One thing that's worth noting is during this last little nightmare segment, everybody gets a send-off. Swansea has this weird boss-like battle, Daisuke has an entire area dedicated to him with the flowers as his main motif, and Curly goes to the Burning Man. However, Anya, one of the most important characters of this game, is not mentioned at all. The pregnancy is mentioned, there's an entire area dedicated to the baby, with Jimmy having to perform an ultrasound in order to progress. But Anya is missing entirely from this last little bit of the game, which I think speaks volumes on how Jimmy saw Anya at the end of the day. He saw her as somebody not even worth remembering during his final moments. Earlier on in the game, when you're looking for disinfectant to help Daisuke, if you look into the medical wing and try and see where Anya's body is, you can't see it, it's just a massive hazy mess. It's because, at the end of the day, Jimmy doesn't really care. To him, Anya was more of an annoyance than anything, constantly shouting at her whenever an opportunity arises. Constantly getting arsey whenever he gets asked to give Cody some pain medication. Making jabs implying that Anya is inferior to him, when in actuality, it's because of Anya that Cody's still alive. If she wasn't there to give him the medical attention that he needed, Curly would have died the moment the ship impacted the space mass. As we progress through this nightmarish hellscape, we find Curly strapped onto a chair with valves sprouting out of his body, force feeding him some of his own leg in a puzzle that took me longer than I like to admit to understand. We walk over to a burning Curly and we talk to him. Curly says that he's taking responsibility for what happened, as no matter what happens, he will be painted as the villain, the one that caused the crash, even if it's not true, as he could have stopped us all from the beginning. Jimmy apologizes for what he did, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. What happened still happened, people are dead, and apologizing won't give them back. Now, we find ourselves playing cat and mouse in the vents against this thing. There's a lot of horse-based monsters in this game, I've noticed. It's fairly simple. You keep moving, looking around. If you see the thing looking at you, move into another vent as quickly as you can, otherwise it's back to the beginning with you. Make enough distance and we find ourselves at the end of this ride. Jimmy puts Curly into the last cryopod and tells him that we are going home, before walking away and ending his own life. Mouthwashing is a game that is there to hurt you. It will make you feel uncomfortable, it will make you do things you don't want to do, and it will make it hurt. And that is why it's one of my favourite games that came out this year. I was so happy that I was able to experience this with no outside influence. There was no expectations laid before me when I started it. All I got was a, you should play this. It's the best way to play this game, blind. If you watched a video and said or read online what happens, you're robbing yourself of one of the best experiences out there. Watching it is not the same, because it's not you doing the actions, it's somebody else. Reading it robs you of the visuals that the game throws at you. Playing it is the best way to experience this. At the end of my first playthrough, it took roughly just over 2 hours. The VOD is up on the VOD channel now, and it's one of those games that's just stuck in my head since. Every now and then I think back to a scene, realise there's something new about it. It's hard to encapsulate why this game rates so high for me. There's just something about how raw it all feels. The way the story is told in these segmented sections, leaving you to put the pieces back together yourself. The game might be a bit too much for people though. I put that warning at the beginning of the video for a reason, as some of these themes might be a bit too much for people who are victims of such horrible acts. And please don't think for a second that I'm saying it's not okay to feel that way. Everyone has their own limits and that's perfectly fine. But for now, all we can do is wash out the taste of this experience out of our mouths. So, does anybody have any mouthwash? It's out on Steam for just £5.99 and runs really well on pretty much any modern setup. Well, that aged well. Game preservation is something that I hold near and dear to my heart. As someone who's been playing games for almost 30 years now, I've seen so many games that fall by the wayside, never to get mentioned or re-released, forever falling into the depths of obscurity. And, unlike books or films, if you want the authentic experience in most of these games, you need to fork out money not just for the game, but also the hardware to play it on. And let's not even get started on if your TV can even play the old consoles, since older consoles weren't around when HDMI became the standard. So, more often than not, if you want to play older consoles like the Sega Saturn, you need to find a TV that has an AV output, or spend money on one of those dongles that convert the video output to HDMI. Either way, the whole process is needlessly complicated. However, this whole issue is sidestepped when companies re-release their older catalogue to newer consoles, giving these games a new lease of life, and honestly, it's great to see. More people need to experience games like Tombi, the original Tomb Raiders, or the classic Sonic Adventure games. However, there are times where, even though the game's out on storefronts digitally, it's taken down for seemingly no reason. During the month of November 2024, Sega announced that they are delisting 74 of their retro games from digital storefronts. 74 games that showcase Sega's history, from the Mega Drive, or Genesis depending on where you are, to the Dreamcast. Gone. Just like that. With no other way to buy them outside paying stupid prices for a key reseller, or by paying stupid prices for an eBay listing. Either way, this makes the consumer out of pocket. Sure, you could say that, you snooze you lose, if you wanted them before you should have bought them. But to that, I have to disagree. It is always unfortunate when games have to go due to issues such as licensing or running cost, and no one wins in this situation. Earlier this year, I made a video about Night into Dreams, a Sega Saturn classic that could have been bought as part of the Sega Heritage Collection, which were a bunch of games sold digitally on the Xbox Store and Steam. However, that video is now outdated because of this. There is no way to buy what is, in my eyes, one of Sonic Team's strongest games, and that is a downright travesty. It's not just Sega that have done this year. Several companies delist games all the time. Good Old Games have been asked to delist Warcraft 1 and 2 from their stores from Blizzard, probably to try and push more people to buy the new Battle Chest version with the remastered games on there. At least with those games you can still buy the original versions on Battle.net, but it still sucks to see that there's less consumer choice in regards to where you buy the game from. Activision delisted several Transformer games, some of which are noted as being some of the best in the franchise, but because of licensing issues, they had to get rid of them. Nintendo themselves released Mario 3D All-Stars, a collection of 3D Mario games, only to delist them after a year of release. And this was the first and only time Super Mario Sunshine ever saw a re-release. And that wasn't even due to licensing issues, they just wanted more people to buy the thing, so they slept on the time limit. If you can't tell by looking at my channel, I'm a big fan of retro gaming. There are loads of games from that era that I think deserve a larger fan following. However, because of games preservation being as poor as it is, most of these games probably will never see another re-release. And it's not just older games that get delisted, newer games are facing the same issues as well. Forza Horizon 4 is getting delisted on the 15th of December due to several car licenses expiring, and that game is only 6 years old. The Crew is a pretty well known one at the moment due to Ubisoft's behaviour around shutting down the servers. They even went out of their way to ensure that no one could play their game. They wouldn't even look into making an offline patch for it, they just took your money and told you to go away, which is disgusting behaviour. At least with Forza you can still play the damn game, but with The Crew you get nothing. And this is only going to get worse with the rise of games as a service. As more and more games lose their player base due to something new coming out, they too will shut their game down forever, damning it to nothing more but a distant memory. A non-racing example of this would be Little Big Planet 3. That got delisted on the month of October 2024, and even if you bought the game before it got delisted, there's no way to play the custom maps as the server that was holding them got taken offline. All those custom made levels from the community gone just like that. 10 years of artistic expression from a dedicated fan base snapped out of existence. It's honestly really sad to see. Think about all these games that you play now, and just think about how many of them will still be around in another 10 years. Would you still be able to play your current favourite game, or will it be in a state which will make it unusable? All those hours you spent grinding for gear, unlocking achievements, playing with friends could be gone just like that, and you won't be able to do anything about it. Some games get delisted because newer releases are due to come out, forcing players to pay more for a newer release instead of giving people the option to buy a cheaper version. Sonic Generations is one example of this. When Shadow Cross Sonic Generations came out, the original one got delisted from Steam, and the only way to buy it was by buying this Sonic Games Collection bundle. And while it's great that there's still an option to buy the older version, the fact that it's locked behind a more expensive package if you're only after that one game basically punishes you for being curious. Sure, the newer version is fantastic, the shadow parts are pretty much peak Sonic in terms of writing and gameplay. However, if you want to see what the original was like and play it with the unchanged script, well, then you have to buy the collection. An infamous example of this is the Warcraft 3 Reforged fiasco, where Blizzard basically deleted the old game out of existence on Battle.net. So not only were you stuck with an inferior version of a classic game, you couldn't even play the classic game. However, while companies are letting these games die, fans have been working overtime to preserve these games, getting them working on modern PCs, and it's great to see. Outrun 2 Coast to Coast is a fantastic arcade racing game made by Sumo Digital. It perfectly captures the original arcadey feel and slaps on some new things on it as well to make it, in my eyes, the perfect Outrun game. Unfortunately, this game, along with the online arcade counterpart on PSN and Xbox Live, got delisted due to Sega's license with Ferrari expiring, and it has never seen a re-release since. Now, I'm no game developer, but honestly, if they could just remove the Ferrari cars and replace them with a standard red fast car, I would be happy. I play Outrun for the gameplay, not for the Ferrari license. And along with that, this would also get rid of the issue with the Ferrari license. However, thanks to some die-hard fans, the game is brought back to a working state on modern PCs. Hell, you can even play it on the Steam Deck. It is amazing on the deck. It's a great on-the-go racing game. And all this was done out of passion. No monetary gain, nothing is locked behind a paywall, the team just made this so people can play a game that they love. Another game that is working only thanks to fan support is Black and White, a fantastic god simulator that was released by the late and great Lionhead. Thanks to fan patches, the game has a whole new lease of life. Without patches, the game won't even run on Windows 10. However, thanks to fan support, you can now play this classic from 2001. Oh my god, the game's over 20 years old. And you should. There's nothing quite like it. The fans even got the sequel working. A more modern game that saw this treatment from fans is Battleborn, Gearbox's failed MOBA shooter thing, with fans making their own private servers so they could still play the game that they invested so much time into, breathing new life into it. While companies are constantly dropping the ball, taking their user base for granted, fans themselves are being the change that they want to see. Want to play Phantasy Star Online, one of the best MMOs ever made? Sure, just load up one of the several custom servers and off you go. Want to play Sonic 06 in an objectively better state than release? Now you can, in the form of a ground-up remake made by a fan. How about the original Silent Hill 2? Fans even got that PC port working on both PC and now the Steam Deck. How about the best game ever made, Sonic R? Thanks to some die-hard fans, the game's running better than ever, with some fan-made patches to help make the game run on modern systems, even on Steam Deck. this game is immortal, it'll never die. Fans have been constantly picking up the slack, fixing games, making abandonware playable, sorting through the mess left behind by these big companies, all for the love of the medium. And that's not even mentioning how important the emulation scene is, helping keeping old consoles that would otherwise be left to dust to thrive. Nintendo seemed to be at war with emulation with its takedown of the Yuzu emulator earlier this year, which in turn took out Citrus, a 3DS emulator. Which makes no sense as Nintendo took down the 3DS store earlier in the year, meaning that there's no current way for them to make any money off the damn console. So taking down an emulator of it just seems overly antagonistic. And thanks to some diehard fans, some games are even getting full-on translations. One big example of a game getting a second wind due to a fan translation is Racing Lagoon. That game was all over my YouTube feed once the fan translation got released. People finally playing what is one of Square's craziest games. Sakura Wars is another game that got the fan translation treatment, one of those Sega Saturn games that was just in Japan. And it's a fantastic game to play through as well, mixing the visual novel and strategy RPG gameplay loops really well. And these are just two examples. There are loads of games that got this treatment. Honestly, it deserves its own video at some point. Despite what you may think about emulation, it is an important cornerstone for games preservation. Some games would not be playable without it. Panzer Dragoon Saga, one of the best RPGs ever made, is a staggering £600 on eBay. None of that money is going to the devs, none of that money is going to Sega, that's just going to someone's pocket. Why should you pay £600 to have the privilege to play this game? Enemy Zero, a game I covered earlier, is similar. That's costing around about £100 to buy. If you want to experience the games more often than not, you'll need to resort to emulation. And the fact that some companies are trying to smother this out is just anti-consumer. If there is no legal way to buy the game from the source directly, then emulation, in my eyes, is a perfectly acceptable way to experience the game. And people think otherwise are honestly not looking at the bigger picture here. Older consoles themselves are decaying either due to disk drives failing to read disks, cartridges failing to load, and old faulty capacitors leaking all over the insides, like what plagues a lot of the original Xbox models. You can't even play your PSP without risking turning your house into a bomb site due to the lithium batteries expanding and becoming unstable. Imagine just loading it up to play some Crisis Core and then... Unless you know what you're doing, or know somebody who does, there will be a time where you won't even be able to play these old games on original hardware unless you spend even more money on a refurbished console or fix it yourself, locking these older games out of a player base even more. Without people drumming up support for these old games through emulation, re-releases would not be as big a thing as they are now, because if no one's talking about these older games, why would companies ever think to re-release them? If fans were not making games run, either through fan patches or emulations, they are trying to lobby together to make some of these big companies actually care about the games they make. Like what the Stop Killing Games initiative are doing, trying to pass legislation in the EU that will put an end to things like what Ubisoft's doing with The Crew. Originally, I wasn't going to make this video, however, the more I thought about this, the more annoyed I got. I love this medium, there's nothing quite like it. I have played games that have made me sad, made me laugh, and everything in between. Games that have stayed with me, games that, when I am down, I will play a sort of comfort. I've met people, maintained friendships, and deepened bonds through this medium. At the end of the day, part of my very core is rooted in video games. How can I say that I love this medium if I don't speak out against what is going on in the space? Don't get me wrong, I'm not expecting this video to change anyone's mind about this. This is just me trying to say that if you do not like what's going on, it's okay. There are ways you can help stop this. You can sign petitions to get your voice heard, and if you're coding savvy, you can help efforts to bring these older games back to life. And if you like to talk, you can make videos expressing your displeasure of what's going on, and trying to get people at the ESA to actually take notice of what's going on, which is important because the ESA went out of their way to stop archiving of older games happening this year. These games might be used for recreational purposes, as if that's a bad thing. They're video games. What do you expect? The thing is, this is allowed for films, books, and the like, but for some reason, for games alone, this isn't allowed. And when you take into account that 87% of classic games counted as critically endangered, An archive would help keep those from being lost forever. But no, you have to make sure the shareholders are happy, art being at risk of being forever lost be damned. However, it's not all doom and gloom. There are some companies that do help keep games preservation alive. Xbox have a great backwards compatible catalogue, with games from both the original and the 360 era playable on the Xbox One and Series consoles. And on top of that, they even have enhanced features like a higher frame rate. Hell, it's currently the only console that can play Sonic Unleashed without the game turning into a PowerPoint presentation. They play straight from the disc as well, which is fantastic. Unfortunately though, not all the games are playable, and some games that are playable cannot be brought online due to, yet again, licensing issues. Sony themselves are also picking up on this. However, their way of doing it is very different from Microsoft's. There's no way to play PS1 and PS2 discs on the PS4 or PS5. However, you can buy some of these titles digitally, which may not seem as user-friendly as Microsoft's way of doing things. It is still nice to see. Some of these titles even come with quality of life changes, such as a rewind feature or save states. Good Old Games themselves are running an initiative to make these older games playable on newer hardware, ensuring that good old games are still playable to people, no matter what hardware they are running. Along with this, they fight to get previously delisted games back on their store, like what happened with Alpha Protocol, a 360 PS3 era game that, while yes, has its issues, is still great fun to play. A more recent example of older games getting re-released would be the original Resident Evil trilogy, all working out the box on new hardware thanks to GOG. And at this current moment in time, they're the only company that are selling the original trilogy. Sony do have the first game available, however, on their PS Store. Before, you can only download the game if you had premium, not buy it, but Sony have changed this recently. Good Old Games also have games that Steam themselves refuse to publish, including several visual novels like the fantastic Chaos Head. Steam have said that the content is not allowed on their store, but if you look on what's being sold right now, you can see that there are some games that look far worse than what Chaos Head have. Even if the game gets censored to release on Steam, they can just say, sometimes close to release, that the game is not a good fit for them, which is a major blow to these games. It generally feels like, with visual novels especially, Steam has a very antagonistic stance against them. However, GOG seem to be welcoming of these, and they're usually my go-to place when I'm after visual novels. It just seems disappointing to see Valve, a company that is usually highly regarded in the PC game space, drop the ball when it comes to this, and act in a way that I think is not only anti-consumer but anti-developer as well, especially when you look at what games they do sell on there. Sex with Hitler, anybody? Either way, even when companies do try to stop games from being released or stop games from being preserved, fans and other companies do help pick up the slack. So, at the end of the day, if things seem hopeless, don't think that there's nothing you can do. As people often say, be the change you want to see. It's that time of year again, where the nights last longer, where the temperature plummets, and where the already grey British days somehow turn even more grey. However, despite all of that, it's still nice to get cozy, make a hot drink and sit down with a nice Christmas themed game. That one game that invokes Christmas nostalgia for simpler times. Nowadays, games tend to have Christmas themed events, usually having a Christmas cosmetic item or three, but there's not that many games that go all out on the Christmas theme, that change the level design or music that fit with the vibes of the winter holidays. Fortnite has its Winterfest event, and Final Fantasy XIV has the Starlight Celebration event, for a few examples. And while they're nice additions, it's still just an event, rather than something that changes the game proper. However, go back a few console generations and you'll find plenty of games that went all out on the holiday season. There were games where you played as Santa, there were games where you played as the elves. Hell, there was a game where, as Santa, you would bowl the elves down an aisle. And then, there's Viscera Cleanup Detail, where you have to clean up after Santa had one too many eggnogs. However, for me, when it comes to Christmas games, I can think of none better suited for that than Nights into Dreams. Now you're probably thinking, Chaz, you've already spoke about Nights, it's the first video you've done on your channel. And you're right, but we're not talking about the full game here, oh no. We're instead talking about the demo Sega released in 1996 for the holiday season. Now, demos were pretty common back then. They used to burn several onto one disc as a way to sample different games before buying them. However, unlike most demos, this one's different. It's special. This one had content that was only on the disc. This was, in itself, its own game. A side story to the main game. With its own things to unlock, its own story mode, it used one of the levels from the main game, Spring Valley, but changed it enough to make it feel like its own thing, and it even has its own music. It also has the first 3D playable Sonic, but more on that later. And no, Sonic 3D Blast does not count. With his own boss fight against Eggman. For a simple demo, a lot of effort got put into this, and it's the main reason why I wanted to talk about it today. So, get cozy, put a blanket on, make a hot drink, because we're diving into yet another Sega Saturn classic. If you're watching this, I'm going to assume that you know the basics about Nights into Dreams, or you've at least watched my previous video about it. But on the off chance you have not, I will give you a brief rundown. You play as Elliot or Clarice, two children who are going through some self-identity issues, and Knights, a funky little jester thing who dualizes, or combines in simpler terms, with the kids. And then you fly around each level, or course as they're called in this game, trying to get the Idia before the time limit expires. Run out of time, and you and Knights separate, leaving you to do this walk of shame back to the start. After doing 4 courses in each level, you get sent to the boss room, ultimately ending the game with a big fight against Riala, Knights' twin, and Wiseman, Knights' creator. And the two kids learn to accept themselves for who they are and end up stronger for it. Simple, really. However, the main draw of Knights is the fact that it's a score attack based game. It's simple, deceptively so, but because of its simplicity, you can go back again and again, perfecting each run to get the highest rank possible so you can brag to your friends. It's also a fairly short game, with about 8 levels total, although 1 is reused of both characters so it's more like 7, but it's one of Sonic Team's best, back when they could experiment with different concepts that are not just Sonic. So what do you get when you take the setting of Knights, a game about looking through your dreams to find inner strength, and slap some good old Kris Kringle in there? You get what is one of the most joyous, coziest feeling games I've played. The gameplay loop remains the same. You walk up to Knights, now sporting a festive new look, and being trapped in a cake this time.
This cake?
And go through all 4 courses, kick Gullwing's butt, and call it a night.
Oh, okay. I see what you did there.
But Chaswick, I hear you ask, you handsome / pretty thing you. What if we're not playing this on Christmas? Well, Sonic Team thought of that as well. The game uses the Sega Saturn internal clock, and depending on what time you're playing the game, the setting will change. You have one for Happy New Year, where the main menu music changes, and Elliot and Clara sporting these fancy costumes. You have the generic winter setting, where it's just a snow theme and the kids are wearing appropriate winter gear. April Fool's Day swaps Knights out for Riala, and, of course, whenever you're playing the game around the Christmas period, it will be Christmas themed, with Santa and his sleigh slowing up at random points if you play on the 24th or 25th of December. If you play at any point outside these settings, the game will default to a Knights Limited Edition version, with the game setting and overall look matching that of the original game. So already, this is a pretty beefy demo. The fact that there's so many events packed into one disc is impressive for something that was given away for free, but set dressing is not all that this game brings to the table. When you start the game for the first time, you're presenting with the opening cutscene, where you find that Clarice and Elliot are going Christmas shopping, but due to the rustle and bustle of shopping, the Christmas spirit seems to be missing. I'm guessing they never went shopping in London around about this time of year. They both look at the central twin seat tower, decorated like a gigantic Christmas tree, and see that while they decorated the tower like a gigantic tree, whoever did the decorations forgot to put the star on top. They feel that with no shining star on top of the tree, everyone's feeling a little bit rushed. So, after doing their shopping for the day, they both go home, get some shut-eye, and end up back in the land of dreams, Titopia, where they're promptly beaten up, robbed of the idiot, and left behind like day old cheese. And Knights has been captured again. Just like old times. Just in case you have not watched the previous Knights video, Idia is basically human dream energy, each colour representing something different. White being purity, blue, intelligence, green for growth, yellow for hope, and red being courage. The red one is special, as it's always with the person bearing it. It cannot be stolen, at least not by some random big boss lackeys, Anyway, back to the game. After a brief fly around collecting the 4 stolen Nydia, we're sent to the boss where we have a one-on-one against Gilwing again. Only this time, he's sporting festive wear. Look at him. He just wants to celebrate Christmas with this tree and this star that he found. Oh, he's dead. Okay then, moving on. The next day arrives with Elliot and Clarice meeting up again. I'm just going to assume they're doing more Christmas shopping. Elliot running towards Clarice to say hello. However, there's snow everywhere, so he can't stop himself in time and ends up barreling into her. Everyone rushes over to check up on them, and then they all have a festive chuckle over what happened. Looks like the Christmas spirit returned to them all after all, and Twin Seed Tower is proudly showing its Christmas star for everybody to see. Showing that all you need is a bit of festive cheer to make the holiday special. The end. After each run of the game, you're sent to this menu, where you have to match 2 pictures up to unlock something. The higher the rank you get in the gameplay segment, the more presents you can open when you get to that screen. And when you clear one screen, you get sent to another. There are a grand total of 3 different present screens, each one with different rewards, so it'll take you a while to unlock everything on this bit. They're usually pretty simple things, a sound test, gallery, maybe you'll land on a Reala space and get booted back to the main menu, you get nothing, good day sir. But there's also a time attack and link attack mode, where you aim for the best time or highest link record on the level, which is good if you like improving times or scores. One thing worth noting about link attack especially is that you don't go through Spring Valley in this mode, you go through Frozen Bell instead. Not too sure why this is the only other level that gets represented in this demo, but it's a nice change of pace nonetheless. Then, there's a whole new game mode where you play as Sonic in his first ever 3D debut. Again, Sonic 3D Blast does not count. Since you don't fly with knights, you get to just wander around collecting chips and just explore the landscape. It's a whole lot more chilled than the Knights gameplay, and there's no egg timer chasing you down trying to give you a rude awakening. You still need to get all the Nydias in the same location of Knights, and once you get all 4, you return back to the prison cake thing where Knights usually is, and you get to fight your own boss fight, this time against Eggman, looking a lot more balloon-like than Egg. I'm guessing inflation hit him pretty hard. And once you beat it, it gets sent back to the main menu. There's no story in this mode, it's just a, here's Sonic, go at it, which is perfectly fine. This is just an additional mode to what is already a free demo. The controls here do leave a bit to be desired. I think the controls are only slightly better than Sonic are, but let's face it, that's not really saying much as I do love that game. And the animations can look a bit wonky at best. I mean, just look at Sonic Run. He's less running and more doing a weird shuffle. I'm pretty sure this entire mode was just a, can we make this work kind of thing. Who knows? Maybe it laid the groundwork for Sonic Adventure. The A-Life system was reused as Sonic Adventure for the Chao, so it's possible. Either way, it's a nice addition to what is already a nice free game. Another present you get is this Nighttopian tracker, which tracks and tells you the status of all the Nighttopians in the selected level. This was not in the original game, and as they were the basis of what would turn into the Chao and the Sonic Adventure series, it's nice to actually keep tabs on how they're doing, see how much they like you, or, depending on how much of an asshole you are, dislike you. What's even cooler is that you can also read the save data of the full Knights game, and it tells you what's going on with that game's Nighttopians as well, which is a nice bonus. And if you want to ensure that no one will ever speak to you again, you also have the karaoke mode, where you get to sing dreams to your heart's content. In a dream I could see you're not far away. Anytime, any place I can see your face. So, not only do you have a small taster for the main game, you also have several different modes to play around with, and access to concept art and trailers, all for free. Well, I say free, but if you want to grab a copy for yourself now, you're looking to spend around about £10 to £20 depending on the condition of the game. And that's for the original version on the Sega Saturn. The re-release that came out on the Xbox, PS3 and Steam did have Christmas Nights as an unlockable bonus, unlockable after beating the main game, but that was a neutered version. You still have the Christmas set dressing, but a lot of the clock features were missing. You can't change the main menu depending what time of year it is, and it only had the Christmas mode on there, so there's no New Year's, no Valentine's Day, Christmas, and that's it. Along with this, the presents feature was ripped out, No longer asking you to match images after completing a run, you just get sent straight back to the menu. The gallery is still available, but the unlockable Sonic segment was taken out for some reason, along with the karaoke, so no more bad singing for you. So, all in all, it's a solid demo of what is already a solid game. It has enough features to make it stand out amongst other demos, and it's content that will make it last a fair bit of time. If you like the original Knights, or if you want to try something a bit more bite-sized before diving into the main game, I wholeheartedly recommend this demo easily. Although I would suggest trying to find the Sega Saturn version just for all the little extra goodies that are there. And hey, at least if you can't find that, you got the Steam and Xbox release costing about... yeah, right, forgot about that.